There we go. Thank you.
All right.
Okay.
So tonight's agenda is displayed there for everyone that's not familiar with it. We're going to start with welcomes and introductions, updates, and then public comment from any of the general public that has things they would like to share with us. We're going to go around and I will call off the members of our committee by name so they can quickly introduce themselves. And then other significant participants, which looks like tonight we don't have a whole lot of other folks joining us, but that's okay. So we'll start with my screen. John, you're up first here.
Okay, John Ruggles. I am a planning and zoning commissioner with the county, District 2. So that's enough.
Thank you. Dave? Oh, you're muted, Dave. Dave, you're still muted.
Still muted.
There you go.
Missed it. Yeah, this is Dave Browning. I've lived here in Doney Park for about 15 years, and many places I've lived around the world. And I do a fair amount of volunteering for things like the county and the city. So, thank you.
Thank you, Dave. Monica?
Hi, I'm Monica, District 2, been here for a while, and I'm the old guy from the old committee.
Thank you, Monica. Bernice?
Hi, I'm Bernice Carver. I've lived in Flagstaff over 40 years, and I've raised my family here, participated in 4-H, lots of community stuff, Girl Scouts, softball, sports, lots of stuff, worked for Gore, worked for the school district, worked for ADEQ and the water company at one time, and retired from the health department. So I know a lot of people in a lot of places, and I appreciate living in Doney Park. It's my favorite place to live. I really want to see what we can do to preserve the rural lifestyle and keep the density low out here, and preserve our natural environment. And guess that's it. Thanks.
Thank you, Bernice. Harriet, are you hiding? Oh, there you are.
There I am. I'm doing emails at the same time I'm doing this. Harriet Young. I'm off of Girls Ranch Road, retired NAU political science professor, and a lover of all things Doney Park.
Excellent. Liz?
Am I up? I'm on. Liz Baldwin, been retired nurse practitioner, been in Doney area for about 27 years. Involved in a lot of community activities, but I'm so proud to be on this committee to represent our area and to keep it rural and to keep it open. And I just want to thank everyone who's joined us tonight in the community, because we need their input, because that's who we represent.
Absolutely. Thank you, Liz. Mr. Bates?
Am I mute? Oh, you can hear me.
Yes, sir.
I'm Brian Bates. Apologies for being late. We've got 2 new puppies and they got into the garden.
Oh, no.
Oh, well. So I've lived here for close to 40 years, and it's an honor to serve with Rob as co-chair of this committee. And thanks to all of the community people who are in attendance.
And it looks like Bernice is next on my screen.
I've already introduced myself.
Oh, I'm sorry. It must have resorted. That's going to keep me confused. Let's see, Bruce. Evelyn.
Evelyn Wani. I've been in Doney, no, where have I been? Timberline for 11 years, Flagstaff area, almost 50. And I, like Liz and Bernice, want to see Doney Park stay rural and listen to the people.
Thank you, Evelyn. Jim Clifford.
Jim Clifford, District 4, Planning and Zoning Commissioner. Been in Doney Park for 30 plus years, and I work at W.L. Gore.
Alrighty, I think that is all the committee members. Did I miss anyone? Excellent. Dave, your question earlier about some of the artwork updates and things like that, the slide right now is displaying one of the potential new covers for the Doney Park Timberline Fernwood area plan. We'll be obviously soliciting lots of input on that, not just amongst the commission members, or committee members, but also during the open houses, which we'll be working on scheduling at the end of this meeting. So there's a little update for you, Dave. So do we have any specific updates right now, Melissa, before we go to public comment?
No, thanks for pointing that out about the new images, and we've kind of scattered them throughout the PowerPoint. So yeah, we'll just need to go through and have Jessica read off our community members.
Yeah, I can do that. I see William Leroy, Sandra, Ken Lorton, John Paxton. Sorry, we're moving around here. Bruce Jacks, Autumn Montoya, Russell Weedman, Doug Meyer, and then I see an iPhone or two.
Nicole, Ken Lorton, Kelly Bingham, and I think that's it.
I said Ken Lorton, Kelly's staff.
Sorry. All
Is
right.
Jess McNeely with us? Jess,
I
are
don't
you?
see him.
Okay.
Actually, yeah, I am. Melissa, I'm on my iPhone.
Oh, that's you. Oh, that's you. Okay. I'm gonna make you.
Thanks, Jess.
All righty. So that is everyone that is here. We can move on to the next. Is there a slide for public comment, Melissa?
Yes, hang on a second. Sorry.
So as has been already mentioned, public comment is critical to the success of this process. We very much appreciate everyone that's taking some time to spend with us this evening, and very much want to hear your thoughts about what's important about Doney Park and you want to see captured in our area plan. We do ask that you keep your comments to 3 minutes so that we're fair to everyone. And if you, as I mentioned earlier, hopefully everyone's microphones are muted unless you're actually speaking. So make sure you unmute your microphone and then share with us your 3 minutes of thoughts about how we can make this area plan as good as we possibly can. So I will look for a show of hands or someone who speaks up. Mr. Leroy's hand is waving at us. So Mr. Leroy, please share for your 3 minutes. You'll have to unmute.
Sorry,
There
my
you go.
fault. I apologize. I was being a good citizen. Let's start the 3 minutes now, please, by God. So anyhow, so words matter, obviously, and as everyone knows, good or bad or indifferent, I've been a strong advocate of changing some words in the plan to be more authoritative, more dispositive, controlling than they presently are. And in the past, when I raised the issue, I had a couple folks from the county, tell me they had a legal opinion from somebody back dated to, era 215, so forth. And that's just information I received. If it's incorrect, I'm just quoting. So in any event, I tried to get the gist of that with multiple communications to various zoning and planning folks, including the lawyer representing the firm that wrote it, and I don't know who wrote it. But anyway, so I got a mildly chastising email back from the attorney, which I figured I would because, it's attorney-client privilege, so I get that. Given that, and if I was him in my situation in my past, I've always tried to metaphorically describe the substance of the opinion absent giving the opinion away, which does not violate attorney-client privilege, but he was unable to do so. So what we have is we have county members telling the committee from a 2015 opinion that nobody on the committee, I'm sure, has seen, neither have I, that you can't use the word shall. Okay, so I sent everybody the Supreme Court decision a couple years back about how in these types of matters, particularly zoning and planning matters, the word shall now constitutes the word must. Not going into all the legality of that because I only got 3 minutes. So the bottom line is this. Committee members have not seen the opinion. The zoning and planning folks are adamant that there is an opinion and that it says you can't use the word must. So by delineating from that, I assume they're going to push forward the opinion you can't use the word must either, or shall, and they're going to push forward the opinion you can't use must. What we're doing here is, if anybody's seen President Joe Biden's infrastructure plan, it contains an element, although it has not passed, but it's probably going to get passed. Maybe it won't, but there's an element in there that talks about racist zoning. So in his plan, anyone that has anywhere there's zoning that controls density, housing types, or land availability, in other words, single family homes on a lot of properties, under his plan will be deemed racist. And so the funds that his infrastructure plan will make available to counties and cities, including transportation improvement funds, will be contingent upon those counties and cities and states being willing to adopt his zoning platform and try to eliminate racism in zoning. So given that Coconino County, I'm sure, wants to get their hands on those millions of dollars that are sitting in a trust for every state, and we haven't seen the legal opinion that they claim happened in the first place, committee members, then why would you trust that it exists, as they say, number one, since you haven't seen it? And I would suggest that you could see it under some confidentiality agreements, which I would support. Number two, even after, there's no definition or substance afterwards in any of the counties that I've looked at all over the state of Arizona where the word must appears in every instance where citizens and homeowners want to protect their rights to certain housing types, density, and so forth. So what I would like to hear ending is I'd like to hear either tonight or at some point in the future, each community member tell me how they feel about that and why they would even trust anything they haven't seen when that controlling word is so important to us protecting what we have out here in Doney Park. Those are my remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Leroy, and for both yourself and the rest of the folks here this evening. It's important to note that while we value your public opinion, because the comments that you're making are not part of the official agenda, we cannot respond back to you in your issues. Our plan that we've adopted since public comment has become more active is the next topic that we'll be discussing on the agenda will be a response to previous public questions that are actually included in our agenda. So just wanted to clarify the process there and make sure everyone understands that we do care and we are listening. We just cannot respond legally until it's on the agenda.
Thank you, Rob. And by the way, great job.
Thank you. Other public members that are here this evening that would like to share some thoughts with us, please speak up. Oh, come on, we're friendlier than that. Hey, Doug, you got a comment to share? Please do.
Yeah, I just want to just briefly summarize what my comment was at the end of the last meeting regarding policies LU2A and B. I think those two policies really need to be relooked at in the light of survey question number 21, in which 86% of the responding people who the household said they do not want to encourage additional types of residential housing development, including higher residential density.
Hey, Doug,
So
sorry to interrupt, but that is our next subject. Your
right.
comments from the last meeting is the next agenda item. And so we're going to go into detail on that here in just a moment.
Great. I just want to say that I do see that that language was in the 20-year-old plan, and I'm not comforted by that. I think we were lucky. And so I hope we don't use the fact that it's 20-year-old language. And that's it. I'll stop.
Oh, no problem. Thank you very much, Doug. I appreciate that. And that's a perfect example of what I was just mentioning. Doug brought this up previously and then was not satisfied with our original answer. So we're going to try again tonight to answer his concerns. Other members of the public that have any thoughts to share with us before we get started this evening? If you could unmute your microphone and speak up, that would be great. Mr. Jacks, please.
Like I say, appreciate everything. I'll keep it short. Everybody, what you're doing for us here in Doney Park, trying to keep it like it is. I'm just curious when we can start having these meetings in person instead of Zooming. And I'm sure a lot of us feel that way. Going back to a lot of folks that have already been involved in it 20 years ago plus, I think it'll be more beneficial and moving forward with that. Just curious when that's going to happen. Thank you.
Well, Mr. Jacks, the good news is we do have our schedule on the agenda, so I can respond back to your question on that. And this may be the last meeting that we do this way, because the next meeting we do after this could be the beginning of the open house process. And that would be an in-person meeting. Right now, it looks like at Cromer School. So we'll be working on that a little bit later this evening.
Wonderful. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Weedman, it looked like maybe you had something you wanted to share.
Yes, this is Russell Weedman. I didn't know I put my hand up, but maybe I did. So,
well, if that's okay,
my name is Russell Weedman. I've been a resident of the Doney Park Timberline area for over 40 years now, and I have to agree with some of the members on the committee and probably most of the members in the community that it would really be great if this Doney Park area plan would be able to protect our way of life out here. And I can't go as far as say to protect our rural way of life, even though it is, but it's not what it was 40 to 50 years ago. It was truly rural at that time. People were farming. There were not many people that lived in the area. And I know for me, when I look at what's going on now and compare that to what was happening back then, it doesn't seem rural anymore. It kind of seems like a rural residential area. I hope that we can protect what's left of the rural part of our community. And I'm hoping that this area plan will be worded in a way that can do that, whatever words are chosen, or that people on the committee, people in planning and zoning will stand up for the results of that community survey that was taken. It's really obvious from the results that what the people that live out here want. So I'm really hoping that this Doney Park area plan will make a difference and help to protect our way of life out here. So, and thank everybody on the committee for doing what you're doing. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Weedman. Any other members of the public that would like to share a thought before we get started? Go ahead and unmute and introduce yourself if you would like to. Okay, hearing none, I made a mistake earlier in not introducing Arena, who is here representing Supervisor Vasquez. I would like to welcome her also to this meeting. Would you like to say anything?
Everybody, hope you can hear me now.
Yes.
I'm Arena. I'm the district director for Supervisor Vasquez, so District 2, which is all of you. He is actually on his way to the National Association of Counties National Conference in Maryland today, so he will not be in attendance. And there's only a couple of things. I just know that as we go into the transportation, he really wanted to just, really say that this is the time for you as a community to really kind of look towards the future, but also to keep those aspects that you guys want within the transportation. I know he's mentioned about getting the mountain line out to this area, and that he's had some conversations and is getting some planning together, but at the same time, this is his guide for when those decisions come to him to really look back and be like, okay, this is what my community wants. So just to be really thoughtful in that sense. But I already know you guys will do that. And I hope you all got the newsletter that was sent out last week. So If you didn't, let me know. I can send it to you. It's virtual. I'm also getting some paper copies if that's more valuable to you. But yeah, pretty much I'm just grateful to be here and to watch this process happen, and appreciate all of you taking the time to do this, as it will really help to give a well-rounded picture to the other board members that don't know you guys in this way. So just keep that in mind. And if you ever need anything from the District 2 office, just reach out to me, and I'll put my info in the chat. But if not, I'll find you somehow. But yeah, that's pretty much it on my end. If you have any questions for me, I'm totally open to that. But yeah, he's kind of sad he couldn't be here, but also, you know, has other things and will be representing the county at this conference, which is really a cool thing. And it's his first conference. So yeah, it's been good. And just getting time to organize and renew for the fall when they come back in August from their break. So thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Arena. And I apologize for missing that initial introduction. All right, Melissa, I think we're ready to move on here from public comment now. And as I mentioned, we are now going to address some previously submitted public comments, primarily the one that we had talked about before, I guess, a little bit, but in a little bit more detail. We have not, I hope we didn't lose. Is he still here?
Yeah, Mr. Myers is still with us.
Oh, okay, my screen just changed, so I lost it. All right, good, great. So Doug is here. This is basically what Mr. Meyer had asked in his request to us. He had some concerns about whether or not in the land use section of the area plan, and specifically policy LU2, we were adequately safeguarding the rural nature of our community and preventing rezoning and high density type development. So if we go on to that next slide, where we have now taken, basically his specific questions here. As he mentioned previously, the survey response to question number 21 was, no, we don't want to see any high density development out here in the Doney Park area. And all of us on the committee reviewed those surveys back in November of last year. And I suspect the majority, if not every one of us, agrees completely with that survey response, that we want to maintain our community the way it is. That's why we live here. Getting more specifically, he mentioned that should strongly be discouraged was removed from land use goal number 2. And let me get the right document open here for myself. And he is correct. We did redline the not strongly. Let's see. His statement. Excuse me for 1 second while I get caught up. Should be strongly discouraged was removed. Let me find out where we put that as a result.
I can read it, Rob, if you need, or we can pull it up.
Well, LU2, it said at one point are strongly discouraged, and we did redline that. The way that particular statement reads now is residential zone changes, especially those that would increase density, should not be approved unless based on the criteria described in this section. The applicant should demonstrate compliance with the provisions of this policy. So while our strongly discouraged was removed, we felt, if I recall from the conversation we had at the time, we made it even more direct by saying should not be approved unless. So Mr. Meyer, that was the thinking behind that change. It wasn't as a way to try to make it more of a loophole or encourage folks to do that type of thing. we felt it read even more strongly by saying it should not be approved. And then his next comment, I've got to bounce back and forth. Melissa, I'm beginning to understand your life here because I'm going between about 3 screens.
Excuse me, Melissa and Rob, is there a way, because not everybody is seeing what we did last time, that we could have both of these up, the comments and the screen that's saying the changes instead of just listening to Rob? Is there a way we could do 2?
Oh, I'm hurt.
No, I love your voice, but
No.
I have it printed in front of me, but maybe not all the people participating do.
Right, and we had talked about trying to do a split screen, but
Okay.
not late this afternoon and didn't have an opportunity
Okay.
to try to do
I'm
that.
not sure I have the technology to do that, but I can pull up the document, although it might be, I'll let Rob continue to read through.
Are there questions about the specific section I just addressed? So LU2, where we took out are strongly discouraged and made it should not be. Amongst the committee members, are you all still comfortable with the phrasing that we have used in LU2?
This is Bernice. I understand why we made the change we did, and I don't think it would hurt to go back and add that back in. Are strongly discouraged, and I would like to change the should to a must, and must not be approved. And the way I would like to do it is to put a period after and must not be approved. I think there's some exemptions in here that could possibly be a foot in the door to a possible big loophole. So I think we need to really examine this and examine it in light of our survey.
Well, Bernice, I believe when we did this review, the survey results were already in. And I would hope that everyone was using those survey results to inform their decisions and recommendations regarding this particular goal or policy, excuse me. Any other?
Yes, but it wasn't until later that I realized that some of these words could be utilized to create more density, and that I could go into examples, and like the preservation of archaeological sites. If there's we need to use examples and really look at what this could do, what somebody could come in and use this for. If they have an archaeological, we have a lot of archaeological sites in Doney Park. If somebody had that on their, say, like 10 acres, could they be exempt because of that from the zone? Could they be exempt from in what we're trying to keep the low density? Would they be allowed to increase the density and have high density residential because they have an archaeological site? And people have that now. And one of the residents in Cosnino said that she has one on her 10 acres. And, it's never given her any extra rights to build more higher density housing on her property. So we have them existing on property now. Do we need to give people a special okay to increase density because they have, these considerations on their property?
If I could,
go ahead,
Rob.
Go ahead.
This is Brian. Bernice, I don't have that phrase in front of us, but my recollection is that it was for the preservation of the archaeological site. It was, I don't think it gives anyone a chance to, build a 5-story condominium there because they have archaeology sites. Rather, it is to make sure that those archaeological sites remain intact and potentially have future value in terms of helping us understand previous cultures of the Doney Park region.
And
Well-
Melissa, could you correct me if I'm wrong, but further on in this document, we do specify that the minimum lot size is 1 acre. And
That's right.
there is no exemption from that anywhere in any way. So even if someone were to apply land use policy number 2 and exercise, the preservation of archaeological sites and important geological features such as volcanic cones, the most they could accomplish would be to rezone something down to 1 acre lots.
That is what that criteria is directing rezonings to meet. So remember, these are for rezoning requests, which is something that the county cannot limit, or we can't prohibit a request for a rezoning. The plan needs to direct, though, how the Planning Commission and the Board of Supervisors should look at those requests and what to evaluate those against. So that's what the purpose of this is.
I see on my copy right here of the land use growth and development chapter, we changed LU1. It says the existing large lot zoning, AR 2.5 and AR 5 should be retained, except as described in the following policies. Now, in my neighborhood, we have 10 houses that are 2.5 acres each. If we go down to a minimum 1 acre lot size and add in the additional dwelling unit on each lot, that could be a potential of 50 residences in the 25 acres that we have.
Get me started on her.
Well, Bernice, although your neighborhood may have 2.5 acre lot zoning right now, not every one of those lots could possibly invoke any or any one or all of these exceptions. So what you're describing really isn't plausible, is the way I read this.
Well, if we make the minimum lot size 1 acre, couldn't that, I mean, right now, 1 acre can have 2 residences on it because of the
Correct.
additional dwelling unit. So, people could go and request for rezoning down to 1 acre, and that could increase density in a lot of places.
It could, but what we're saying in LU2 is it shouldn't be approved unless one of these 4 criteria are met. And the Planning and Zoning Commission and the county supervisors agree with that.
I'm just worried that people will use these exceptions for the zone changes. And once they start getting passed, then it's going to set a precedent.
Okay.
It will not pass because the Planning and Zoning Commission looks at the lands that are surrounding the existing properties, and those properties are zoned accordingly. If you are zoned 2.5, you have 10 2.5 acre lots. Someone wants to cut it to a 1.5 and a 1, it will be denied because of the zoning in the area is 2.5 acre minimum. The 1 acre minimum, from what I understand, the way it is written, is on existing properties. It's not in a land split. If somebody has 40 acres and the land around it is 2.5 acre minimum, then that 40 acres would be approved at 2.5 acre minimum lots or 5 acre minimum lots, whichever the developer wants. But we will not take it down to 1 acre lots.
I would like to add a little bit to what Jim Clifford just said about that. And there is somewhat of an exception to that. And that is the way we dealt with the Johnson Ranch development. And that was with clustered development, where the same number of lots they would get where they are 2.5. We went forward with open space and smaller lots where they did not abut surrounding properties or adjacent properties that were larger than that, as in AR 2.5. It was the only way that we could avoid the owners of that property from doing a wildcat subdivision. Now, you got a choice, and that's one of the things it comes down to. And real quick, I see Harriet has a question in the chat box here. I hate to tell her that you're not going to get language in the area plan because, again, and this is controversial for some people, it is an advisory document which the P&Z Commission and the board take into consideration. There is no way that you can put language in there that will actually stop, 100% stop a development that may be desirable, as Harriet asked, for tax purposes or any other reason. I think the language that we put in there about should not be approved is far stronger than the old language. That's about as far as we can go. And one other thing, in terms of must, that would contravene the zoning ordinance in a case like this, applying that. So I wouldn't want to go along with must at all.
If we applied must to the wording, would the zoning ordinance have to be changed to comply with the area plan?
Not unless you're willing to put on your lobbying hat and go to the Board of Supervisors or the Planning and Zoning Commission and make a case for that. That's where you'd have to get the change first, not with the area plan by saying must. There is a problem with both Planning and Zoning Commission. I don't think that you could get that past P&Z, much less the Board of Supervisors, unless the ordinance itself gave the area plan the authority to say must, which is regulatory.
Okay, before we get too deep into must, should, shall, would, could, whatever, and I'm not trying to trivialize it, but that wasn't this particular conversation, and we do have that coming up. So, Bernice, I think we have, I understand what you're saying here, and I would like to know from other committee members if they have similar concerns, and if they do, recommendations that they would like to make to the phraseology here to help alleviate those concerns. So I'm not hearing any other committee members indicating they have a concern with it.
Rob, this is Evelyn. I do have a concern.
Okay.
I just don't have a recommendation. I just, I don't know legally what everything, like what John talks about, but I really feel that developers have a squirmish way of getting their way. And I'm just afraid that
specifically what your concern is?
That a developer down the road is going to find a way to come in and talk somebody out of their land and to build something that they can make money out of. And somehow they'll squirm their way through all this. And everybody does not want this, I
Right.
mean, the survey says that quite clearly. And I just feel that, if somebody really needs some money or something and they got a lot of land and they sell it to a developer, what can the developer really do in the long run? Kind of like a car salesman, or whatever. They just have a way of getting their way. And that's what scares me. That's it.
So Rob, could I just interject here and just, I did want to draw attention, and I know we don't have it on the screen, but the second part of this policy lists the specific criteria that rezonings would need to meet. And the first one starts out with a minimum lot size of 1 acre or greater should be maintained. And as Jim brought up earlier, that number 3 under that section is lots that are adjacent to residentially zoned land should be of equal or greater size than the largest abutting or adjacent surrounding parcels. So that addresses a lot of, I think, what Bernice was describing, where if there is a 2.5 acre parcel and a property owner wanted to rezone that to 1 acre, if it's surrounded by 2.5 acres, this policy is quite clear that that would not be a desirable change because it doesn't meet that criteria. And then it does go on and it talks about approval of residential zone changes. The total density should not exceed 20%. That's a pretty, excuse me, limiting number right there. So overall density increase is a whole nother factor that I don't know that we've really talked about in great detail, but limiting the overall density increase of 20% does dramatically change the formula and would greatly, again, limit the number of lots that could be increased. So when you start to do the math with the acreage, and I am not quick on my feet with math, but if we took a pause or somebody else is quick, then we could see that that actually would do a lot to minimize any kind of changes. I just wanted to bring attention that you've got those criteria already listed, and then there are further criteria below that. So that's policy, the second part of LU2.
Melissa, this is Liz, and Rob, this is Liz. And that's so funny, Melissa, I was going to mention the LU2 for those things about the 20%, also about abutting and adjacent. But in this thing about archaeological sites, and this is my question, I kind of agreed with Bernice, and I left to go get a pen, and then the question open to questions. Somebody else, I think you started speaking, I was concerned about using stronger language because it says in the exception of archaeological sites. So let's say you have an archaeological site, which we have on our neighbor's property. They say, oh, well, I can't, I'm going to make it a 1 acre. So then you pull in the 20%, then you pull in the abutting, because you said if it's an archaeological site, you make an exception. So then even though I'm abutting them and I want to keep my 5 acres, she has a site that she wants to split, and so she's going to have so then does that mean that I could come in and say, okay, that's abutted, so if I'm in desperate needs, I can change mine to 1 acre too, because now I have a 1 acre exception because of an archaeological site? And I get what Bernice is saying, because there are so many sites, pith houses and old shepherd.
Right. And
I think, can you use that to do that?
Think of this as a couple of layers. The first layer that has to be reviewed are the LU2A, the first part, and those are the criteria. And you're saying clearly that the zoning should not be changed unless there are clear benefits to the community. So that's kind of the first blush, if you will, that a developer would need to basically meet in order to take a rezoning through the first phase. The second part of that, then, if some benefits, some of these benefits to the community would seem to be provided with a rezoning, then the second layer that goes on top of that would be the criteria. So it's not an either or, it's both of those apply to any type of rezoning. Does that make sense? Does that help? So in other words, if there was a large piece of land and there was significant archaeological sites on it and that was being preserved in perpetuity, then that is one layer. The second layer then applies the 1 acre minimum, the 20% rule, and everything else that we just talked about.
So in other words, you're saying that archaeological site could be preserved, and if they wanted to split, they couldn't split it to 1 acre. That's what you're saying, unless it benefits the neighborhood. But then how do you get that information benefit the neighborhood? Because we keep on going back to the survey, and sometimes I don't feel that.
Well, the benefit to the neighborhood would be the process that they would have to go through with the Planning and Zoning Commission, the public meetings actually they would have to start with, then the Planning and Zoning Commission, and then the county supervisors to get the zoning approved.
And there were 4 specific benefits may include, and then they were listed, protection of environmental license, right? So all of those. Mm-hmm.
And I think one important thing to note here is LU2 would result in increased density. And I think some people are reading increased density and imagining high density. It is not. That it is not what that means there. What that means is as low potentially as 1 acre, but no further. Correct, Melissa?
Right, and then no more, an increase of no more than 20% of what's existing over current zoning. And as well, then it would not be allowed to rezone to a lesser density than what's surrounding it or abutting it. And that
So-
was a topic of discussion that you all had in terms of, you know, whether it be adjacent or abutting. So we added both
ahead,
words
Liz.
in there.
Okay, so yes, so the example that I'm saying, the archaeological site that right next to it's abut my property, they could not say, well, we want to split, but now we're going to do an acre because, and I'm not saying, I'm just giving that example because we're very proud of this site, but, and so is my neighbor. But if they moved and they wanted to do that, they could not. And you're saying that LU2, the one about the 20% and also the abutting would save that unless it's beneficial to the community and would do a vote on. I see, it's just so foggy to me, but just like the must and the shall and the should, I just like to see the statute or the planning, the P&Z that says you can't use must for stronger language. But I have been lazy. I haven't looked at it myself. But anyway, but so that's those two other prefaces under LU2 cover that. Yes.
Okay, so Liz, am I interpreting that you are comfortable with it the way that it is right now?
If I get a yes.
This is Bernice. I'm still not comfortable with it, and I'm getting even more uncomfortable as we get along. Let's see, it says LU2 residential zone changes, especially those that would result in increased density, should not be approved unless based on the criteria described in this section. And then zone in LU2A, zone changes may be considered if significant and clear benefits to the planning area residents have been identified and are supported by planning area residents. Such benefits may include those listings, those 4 listings down below, but it's not limited to those. I think we need to limit it. We need to limit, we need to retain our existing density as it has been requested by 80%, 6% of the residents here. I don't feel like this, the way we have this, is protecting that enough. And what if somebody sells their property? What if they've downsized their property and then some other person owns it and then they want to downsize it?
It wouldn't be approved. They don't meet these criteria.
Well,
this wouldn't even apply in that scenario.
They could just show benefits. And talking about taking it to the planning and zoning, I feel like that we're not getting enough notifications of zone request changes. If somebody's affected by it, if it's in your neighborhood, you should be notified of it, whether you're within 300 feet or 3,000 feet, if it's going to affect your enjoyment of your property, or if it's going to affect your private road where we have some places that are getting high traffic because of these VRBOs, and the VRBOs, some of them are having events there. And
I think we're getting a little outside of the scope of what LU2 is addressing out here, Bernice.
Okay, I'm just worried that those 4 items that can be identified, those 4 items that are considered benefits, they're not limited to those 4 items. It says they may include.
Okay.
Can we take out the word? Can we take out the word may? I still don't feel that it makes a difference if somebody has a archaeological site on their property. It can still be preserved like it is now without telling them that they can have higher density on the rest of the property.
Okay, Bernice. I think we understand your point. And I'm anxious to hear from other members of the committee if they have similar or other issues with this particular section.
Rob, this is Evelyn again. I'm just kind of looking at beyond us and planning and zoning committee. What if 20 years down the road, there's a different mentality in the planning and zoning committee? And would they be able to manipulate our plan so that it ends up to their advantage, and maybe they're thinking more high density in that particular planning and zoning committee 20 years from now.
Well,
is that possible?
oh, absolutely. And just as kind of a side note, a new planning and zoning commission or a new county board of supervisors could completely ignore our area plan in making a decision if they chose to do so. This document is not mandatory. It is a tool for them to use should they choose to.
Guidance.
I hope they would. But you're absolutely right, Evelyn, and there is no way that we can address that part of the problem. A change in personality on either the planning and zoning or the county supervisors could mean all of our work is ignored completely.
Rob, could I just make one interjection here? So remember, with any rezoning, there are 3 specific findings that the planning commission and the board of supervisors have to make. And those are coming right out of the zoning ordinance. One of those is that the proposal for rezoning has to meet the goals and policies of the comprehensive plan, and by extension, then the area plan, because the area plans are basically amendments to the comprehensive plan. So Rob's right. I mean, depending on the attitude of the current elected officials and appointed officials, then those policies, will be looked at perhaps in different ways. However, that is a finding that has to be made. And that's something that each rezoning must go through and be scrutinized under. And if you don't mind, if I could ask Bernice a question.
Sure.
Yeah, Bernice, so I was wondering, were there, some, have you, seen or observed over the past, since 2001, since the existing area plan was approved, kind of, can you give us some examples of these areas of change that you noticed that, maybe were rezonings that were approved under the current policies? Because what we're looking at here is basically the current policy just reworded. So I'm curious to understand, where those areas might be that you've seen changed under the current policy that concern you.
Okay, I have not been to planning and zoning meetings. I just see the changes in the neighborhoods. And
I just started to interrupt, but I do want to mention, and I know because we have watched out in you're in this area, many land divisions.
Right.
Land division is very different than a rezoning, and that's something so important to remember. Because there are a lot of properties, for instance, 10-acre properties owned AR 2.5 that can be split into 4. That's not a rezoning, that's just a land division. And that has happened a lot out throughout the whole county, but particularly in Doney Park, Timberline, Fernwood, we see a lot of that activity.
That's why I think it's so crucial to have the correct words in here to make this enforceable. So, if we do have a change in the board of supervisors or the planning and zoning, that this document has the words that will make it viable to go.
Remember, a land division though doesn't fall on, we don't have any control that way.
Land division.
Yeah.
I'm not just talking about the land divisions. I'm talking about the rules that the zoning, planning and zone, or the planning and zoning to approve zoning requests, change requests. And I just think it's so crucial, but we're getting more and more people on their lots adding extra residences. And I know they're not approved because they don't meet the definitions that are required under ADU and the zoning code. And that we're getting a lot of higher density from that, people living in barns, people living in garages and RVs and things like that.
Well, that's more of an, like you're pointing out,
those are clearly in violation.
Yeah, that's an enforcement matter. Because I do know that over the past,
I'm more concerned about our whole neighborhood.
Yeah, but thinking about this particular policy, I do know that over the past 20 years, there have been very few rezonings approved. And that is what this is specifically addressing.
Early on, the interest rates were higher. We didn't have lower interest rates, and there just is a construction boom. And it's not just here, we see it everywhere. We see it in Prescott Valley, Chino Valley, lots of places that are just putting up high, look in Flagstaff, look at all the multi-unit housing complexes that are going up. And I'm sure they would like to put them out here too.
Bernice, I think I'm not trying to cut you off or anything, but I believe that we as a committee understand your concerns. I think you've done a very good job of enunciating and explaining those to us. But as a committee, we have to function in a semi-democratic way here. And what I'm hearing is the rest of the committee appears to be pretty comfortable with the work that we have completed up to this point with LU2 parts A and B. And while I recognize you're not, I don't know that we can make everyone happy on every issue here, and hope that you can understand that.
I would just like to see it the strongest language as possible and not leave open doors and gray areas and just say it, you know, it may include the following, but it could be a whole lot of other things too.
And that's why we count on the Planning and Zoning Commission and count on the county supervisors to make sure that if there is some other condition, it's one that's consistent with, you know, the narrative that our area plan is defining.
Rob,
Brian, go ahead.
What I'm hearing Bernice say is that she's not comfortable with the fact that we list 4 conditions, but we don't close it out.
Right.
Okay, that's what I'm hearing you say.
That's one.
And I can understand that. I'm not sure that this is where we want to go, but I want to feel this out. So I'm not saying we do this or not do it, but that might be to put a statement in. Any other claims that are offered in a zone change must have extraordinary evidence supporting that it will maintain the community values and rural nature.
I'm going to offer a little bit of an alternative to that is already used in the zoning code. And you can say including but not limited to. And that gives you an opening to look at far more than just those 4 conditions.
But I think she wants to do just the opposite, John.
Yes.
She would like to restrict it to just.
She wants to restrict it.
Yeah.
Actually, I don't think that is a good idea for the simple reason that one of the things that we did when we revised the zoning code was to try to increase the ability to look at other things than what were specifically delineated in the code prior to the update.
Right.
And that is called flexibility. And we have used that at the Planning and Zoning Commission level and forwarded projects or denied them based on that.
I'm concerned that it won't be 20 years from now that this might, you know, there may be a push for high density. There might be something come up the month after this is approved. You know, then there's a big push for development right now.
But Bernice, high density isn't a part of any of this area.
It isn't.
What do you mean by high density, Bernice? I'm just curious.
Multi-units.
So this zoning would not be, that type of zoning would not be allowed or considered under this policy.
Okay, but if you provision of public facilities, could a public facility be a multi-unit complex?
Not
Well,
a
it
housing
says-
complex.
It says provision of recreational parks and public facilities. And we talked about those being things like fire stations, libraries, schools.
It couldn't be a multi-unit complex.
Well, if it were,
That's-
it would be something the county would be building. And so the county supervisor would in effect be applying for the zoning change. So at that point, it wouldn't matter what we had in our area plan because they had already made a decision that was inconsistent with it and moved forward on it.
Is there, Melissa, is there land out in Doney Park, Timberline, Fernwood that is owned by the county or owned by the city that they could possibly build a multi-unit complex on?
Not that I know of, but there is land owned by the county. And of course, the biggest parcel is the flood control parcel, which is not going to be developed. And if it is, it will be for very limited recreational, passive recreation use. There may be a few other very small parcels. I would have to look that up, Bernice, to see exactly where they are and what and how big they are. But I don't. Yeah, sorry.
Only thing I can think of would be the dump, which is a large city-owned parcel.
No, I wish I had it in front of me. This is Liz. I remember looking at the parcels after John Ruggles told me how to get the parcel maps. And there were some, I'm thinking over near the water tanks that was owned by Flag. And I think it was 5 acres. It's over near the Doney Park water towers. But I don't remember the parcel number. I should have written it down. I was just surprised to see some land owned by the city.
Okay.
So if the dump ever got, what is the useful life of that dump? Is that something that we should be looking at? Could that be a big change in our area?
It's not in the planning area, number one.
Oh, okay.
It's not within the planning area. And just from what I know about adaptive reuse of landfills, that would not be suitable for residential development. They've been used as parks.
Okay.
They're just not, it's not the type of environment for residential development.
Okay. So, John, you had suggested something kind of as an alternative to what Bernice was asking for. I don't think she would want to go that direction.
If you're trying to tighten it up, no, that wouldn't work. However, my opinion is that it should go the other way and allow you to consider other things, which means to a developer, oh, I've got to come up with more stuff to convince these folks on the P&Z Commission.
And Bernice, I think I understand completely where you're coming from and understand how restricting that might be beneficial. I read that and say, those 4 reasons are probably pretty good reasons for our community to consider, not to grant, but to consider a change. But I don't think I'm smart enough to know all the possible other ones that might exist or could exist 20 years from now. And that's why I'm okay with leaving that slightly open like that. So that's just a different perspective to share with you on that particular one.
Rob, this is Brian. I agree with you. I think it is pretty narrow when you look at the entire policy within the context of the entire document.
Mm-hmm.
And if you nitpick this and that, and I don't mean that negatively, but if you're trying to dice it apart, then yeah, you could poke holes in it, but you've got to look at it in terms of the entire document.
Yeah, I think.
Okay. Evelyn, you brought up a point that I thought was very good, and that is we don't know what's going to happen in 20 years. But Evelyn, you're still going to be kicking around in 20 years, and I think it would be great if you were continuing on the next long-term planning for the Doney Park, Timberline, Fernwood area, because you've got some very good ideas.
Oh, you're funny, Brian. Thank you.
I'm not trying to be funny. I think that you've got some real insight.
Hey, Brian, I have to excuse myself for about 5 minutes. Would you mind picking up where I'm leaving off here?
Well, that means I have to turn the video back on.
Thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
This is Bernice again. In LU1, under residential policies, it says the existing large lot zoning, AR 2.5 and AR 5 should be retained except as described in the following policies. Then in the policy LU2, it says the minimum lot size is 1 acre. So don't those conflict?
Well, I think we've got to go back again, Bernice, that it's dependent upon, you can't do a zone change if the property around you is already, it's got to be constrained by what the property is around the parcel that's being going through a zone change.
And not only, I'd like to add to that, not only that, but the subdivision ordinance also deals with this. And the other thing is that one of the things that you would like to have that 1 acre minimum in there for are situations like Johnson Ranch, which allowed a compromise that kept it something planned rather than a wildcat development.
Yep.
So,
Exactly right, John.
so John, when everyone's mentioning this abutting, like I said, I agree, but this archaeological feature that you can make, that's an exception. So could you answer me, Melissa or John, about if it abuts your property, they can't do it even with the exception because it abuts my property. They can't make that except, but that was one of the exceptions. So they could go down to a minimum of 1 acre, but not less. And that's because we listed it in our exceptions, correct?
No,
Okay.
no.
Well, Melissa can answer that one as well.
Go
as I
ahead, John.
will.
Sorry to interrupt.
I was going to say that what you've got in the area plan is, like I said, advisory, very much
Yes.
like a comprehensive plan. So it means that you've got to consider that at the P&Z and Board of Supervisors level. It's not, it doesn't contravene the zoning ordinance. When you say it shall, you've got to consider it. So that and the zoning ordinance also limiting you as to what you can do if it abuts or is adjacent to properties such as AR 2.5 or AR 5 or even general for that matter, I think.
Okay, so the answer is yes, that would protect an archaeological site from encroaching on someone's splitting or dividing, and they couldn't go to one minimum lot because of those two.
Well, lot splits are entirely different.
Not a lot, but
a zoning change.
yes. So that means, yes, they could not do that, even though they're saying the archaeological site is an exception to the rules.
Yeah, because the overriding thing here is what is in the zoning ordinance.
Okay.
That is regular.
That's all I wanted. That's all I just want to say. It's a yes, it overrides that. Okay. Thank you.
With that now being clear, I'd like to hear from any of the committee members who have not spoken up if you have a concern.
I have another concern. If somebody
Bernice,
wanted to
Bernice, if you could give me just a
property-
minute and see if anybody else does, and I'll come back to you.
Okay, I'm
Thank
sorry.
you. Are there any other committee members that have a concern?
I don't really have a concern. I think that we have done a pretty good job of saying this is what we want and this is what we don't want. And we cannot make ourselves so we cannot require the elected Board of Supervisors or the zoning commission to do exactly what you want. And we can only claim, we can only say that this is what we don't want you to do, and in the strongest words we can. And that's it, because they are elected officials and we are not.
Thank you, Dave.
Brian, it's Harriet.
Yes, Harriet.
I'm just going to follow up on what he said, which was, if you recall, Tom Chabin voted for the filling station and the what's it called, the residential area next to the Chevron. So
Hutchinson Acres.
Thank you, Hutchinson Acres. I knew it was H. You know, he voted for it, even though all the neighbors out here told him we did not want that. We didn't think we needed that. We didn't like it at all. And he voted for it for his own reasons, which he expressed very clearly. And we defeated him in the next election. And I think that is the story that, you know, Bernice, if they don't comply, you just work on the next election. That's what you have to do.
But then the damage is done. And
Well,
I was just thinking
short
of
of suit,
That is true.
You can't
Harriet?
stop progress.
Let me interject, and I don't want to get into a big conversation on this. I do know in a conversation I had with Tom Chabin, his justification to me was that he thought it better to have that as a planned development rather than as a wildcat. Now, whether you agree with me or not,
Yeah, no, I knew that. And Don Howard told me the same thing. So yeah, I got schooled on this. But it would still overruled what the neighborhood thought. So reasons or not, it still pissed people off.
Okay, and as you said, Deb Hill was then the next supervisor. So
correct.
Let's move on. Bernice, let me come back to you.
Okay, thank you. Okay,
Thank you, Brian.
a zoning change may be considered if there's a provision of a recreational park. What if somebody bought 30 acres and wanted to have a zoning change? It could be approved if they provided a park in the community, if they could increase the density on, they could increase the density on that parcel that they have, if it provided a recreational park for the community.
Bernice, my understanding is in
You
this
read
case,
that way?
it would be a county-owned private public park. To be public, it would have to be something that was owned by a public entity, a city, a county, a state, or whatever. It could not be private property.
Well, it just says here provision of recreational parks and public facilities. You know, it doesn't say who owns it. You know, could it be owned by a multi-unit housing? You know, I seem to be stuck on this, but I'm just stuck on not increasing density. It doesn't matter what it is. I'm just trying to protect the dark skies and the open spaces.
Bernice, what does public owned mean?
It doesn't say public owned. It just says provision of recreational parks.
Public entity. It says, what does it say? It says a park that is owned by the public.
Well,
public is the county, state, and us. Privately owned is a subdivision or a park in a subdivision that is privately owned. It's not public owned.
Okay, then in LUA4, we need to insert the word public before recreational parks. You know, a planned community could have a recreational park.
But it's private, not public.
Right, but it doesn't have the word public in here. So it doesn't say what type of park. It just says recreational park.
But it's on private property. It's not on public property, it's on private property. That means that the general public cannot use it. It's for that subdivision only and their guests. I can't just walk in there and put my granddaughter on their swing set. That's illegal. You are trespassing.
Well, this is under residential goals.
Correct, but you have to read it as it is stated. If it is private property, a developer builds a private subdivision and sells the properties to an individual, that is still private property. That's private domain, not public domain.
And if I could again interject, Bernice is bringing up the point that the way that sub policy is written, it says provision of recreational parks and public facilities. It doesn't specify whether or not that park should be public or private. It just says provision of recreational parks and public facilities. So what I did hear Bernice suggest is adding the word public. So it would read provision of public recreational parks and public facilities as one of those benefits.
Melissa, before you make changes, I think we as a committee need to
evaluate
whether that's what we want to do.
I'm just repeating what I heard Bernice say.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
I'm one committee member who will go along with that.
It just concerns me that somebody might want to put in a subdivision and get exempt from the minimum lot sizes by providing a public park within their subdivision.
They wouldn't be exempt from minimum lot sizes in any reason for under LU2. The minimum lot size in LU2B being 1 acre applies regardless.
Right.
It says the existing large lot zoning should be retained except as described in the following policies. So you don't have to abide by the lot size restriction. If you
Bernice,
provide a recreational park.
read part 2B, LU2B though. Read the criteria there.
2BI.
LU2BI.
So nothing can be smaller than 1 acre lot based on that. Is that how you read that, Bernice?
Yes.
Does that help allay some of your fears there or concerns?
Well, it says increasing to zoning density should only be approved if no other means are feasible to achieve the desired benefits listed above. Such zone changes should meet the following criteria.
As Melissa stated earlier, both parts A and B apply to any proposed zone change.
Okay.
You can't go with just A and say, okay, I'm done. I met one of those criteria and ask for anything in the world. Well, you can actually, you can ask, but it wouldn't meet this criteria.
Mm-hmm.
LU2B also, that criteria also has to be met. And John, I heard you mention that you would support the revision that Melissa had Bernice had suggested and Melissa had captured.
Yes, that is correct, because I think that just makes it more specific.
Okay, and
that would address it.
So if the rest of the committee agrees with that, unless anyone has any objection, and if it would help Bernice feel more comfortable with that particular item, then we should go ahead and add that.
This is Brian. I agree with adding public as suggested by Bernice.
So we ensure that it's in clear plain language that we're talking about public owned facilities. Okay.
So it's
Melissa, you
public
got that?
owned, not provided to the public.
I'm sorry, Bernice?
So it has to be owned by the public.
Yeah, right.
She meant not provided for the public, but owned by the public.
That's what we're, I
Well,
think that's what you captured, right, Melissa?
Whether or not it's owned or available for public, honestly, the county would have to accept it for maintenance. But if it was a developer that agreed to build a park that then would be open for the public, but took on the maintenance, that would relieve the county of some financial burden that I think is a benefit to everybody. So the details would be worked out at that time. But if it said, if it read provision of public recreational parks and public facilities, that's pretty clear.
I'm still worried about the number of zoning changes that could come out of this that would increase density in neighborhoods. I would like to put some kind of language in here to protect the neighborhoods being informed of the zoning changes at a larger scope than they are now.
That's already required as part of the request for a zoning change.
And the county, in many, many cases, goes well beyond what the statutory requirement for notification is, which is 300 feet.
And Bernice, another thing that can happen is you have an option to sign up on a county email so that you'll get pushed notification of those kinds of things. So even if you aren't within a specific distance or something, you can be notified of any potential zoning changes anywhere in the county.
I would just like to see the language in here more limited.
Right. I think we have heard that and understand that. I think we've made a change now specifically relating to the public parks and recreation facilities. We were specifically addressing Mr. Meyer's issues here, and I think that was LU2A that we have just successfully addressed. Is that the committee's consensus?
Thumbs up on that.
Okay.
I agree.
Looking back at the slide here, the concern that Mr. Myers expressed was developers are encouraged because the benefits listed without reference to the cost to the community of the proposed high density residential development. And Mr. Myers, since, as I mentioned earlier, nothing in either of or any part of LU2 authorizes any kind of high density development. The 1 acre minimum lot size applies regardless, and that is not high density development.
Is that considered one residence with an ADU per acre?
Yes, ma'am.
So it wouldn't be multi-unit?
Correct. Single family.
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Meyer, does that kind of address that particular one for you? Like,
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. We could split hairs on the difference between high and higher, but I don't want to push you guys on that. If you could just go down to point number 5,
okay,
regarding the statement in LU2B.
Okay. So let me get to that in my other document here. LU2B5.
And it's also shown on the screen there in quotes.
Yeah. Why am I not seeing it where I'm looking here? Excuse me just a second. LU2B states that. Okay.
It's right at the first paragraph for LU2B.
Okay. Increase existing zoning censure where exceptions should only be approved if no other means. So we added the word only in there to strengthen this particular statement. If no other means are feasible to achieve the desired benefits described above. And then we go on to list the specific criteria they still must meet, which is what we were talking about earlier, the 1 acre lot size, the increase not more than 20% of the total density, not smaller than adjacent or abutting lots. All of those criteria still apply.
And Rob, I'd like to make clear that they've got to meet all of those criteria, not just one.
Correct. That's a good point, Brian. So in section A, one of those criteria would allow you to move on to section B, where you then have to meet all of those criteria. And then convince the Planning and Zoning Commission and convince the Board of Supervisors.
And Rob, do you want to read that again in LU2B, the opening paragraph? Read that again, just to reiterate the changes.
Okay. Let me get back there in my document. So 2B reads, increases to the existing zoning density are rare exceptions and should only be approved if no other means are feasible to achieve the desired benefits described above. Such zone changes should meet the following criteria. We said they are rare, but we added are rare. We said they're exceptions, and we said they should only be approved if no other means. And one thing that we did notice earlier today, some of the documents on our website are not the most current edited documents. So if, my apologies to everyone, if you've looked on the website and looked at one of our documents, it may have been updated if it's the most recent one that we're working with since it was posted on the website. And the changes that you're hearing tonight that we're reading out loud are from the most current document and are as will be described or displayed when we have our open houses. All right. So I think we have, hopefully, Mr. Meyer, addressed your concerns. And Bernice, yours?
I have one concern about B3. Lots that are adjacent to residentially zoned land should be of equal or greater size than the largest abutting or adjacent surrounding parcel. Didn't we say that all the parcels surrounding or abutting it have to, could they pick which one they want? Could they pick a different parcel? Like if you had 2.5 acres and then you had 1 acre on one side and 2 acres on 2.5 on one side?
Bernice, if you read that, it says it should be of equal or greater size than the largest abutting or adjacent. So you don't get to pick. It's the largest one that's abutting or adjacent to you.
Okay, okay. I was afraid that we could choose either or.
Nope.
Okay.
That decision's already been made for you. It's the largest one.
Okay, that surrounds you.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay, I think we're ready to move on then.
Rob, I have a procedural question. So Melissa, this may involve you. We've made some minor changes here. Do we need, what's the procedure for us for moving on from the document we just worked on?
Well, I think we've done it 2 ways. We've taken kind of voice votes,
right,
in some cases, and then other cases we've, if no one objects, I think we're ready to move on. What would you recommend here, Melissa?
I think we can just go around the committee and to document the agreement, and we can just reiterate the changes. And I just have the one change that we talked about. And if you want to just go around and get agreement on that, we can do that.
Do a roll call vote, or do I just?
Sure. Or just in general, everyone's
That's
saying.
a little overkill, I think. Okay, then I guess I would like to ask the committee members, and first, Melissa, could you read that change the way that it is now written?
It was for LU 2A4, and it read provision of public recreational parks and public facilities. So inserting the word public before recreational.
Was the change, adding that
Was
one
the change,
public
yes.
to make sure that they're both public.
Yes.
So I would like to ask the committee members, all those that support the change as Melissa just described, please say aye.
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 Any
Aye.
committee members that are opposed to the change that we just read off, please say nay. Okay, I think we can move on then with confidence that we have reached consensus here.
Mhm. I'm still not in favor of the exceptions to make zoning changes, that LU2A 1 through 4. I think it opens the door to too much development possibility. But I guess
Thank
I'm
you.
outnumbered.
I'm sorry, you're
I
not
guess
what?
I'm outnumbered.
Not numbered.
I think we ought to be able to preserve archaeological sites and other things without downsizing the lots.
But what she said to me was, Melissa, remember, Bernice, I thought they both said it was a yes. They can't downsize it because of the 20% and the abutting adjacent, right? So if that archaeological site is there, that was my big concern, because there are many around the area that they can't downsize it because of those 2 other, I don't know, articles or subcategories of the 20%. And I asked them, I said, is that a yes? And John and Melissa goes, yes. Is that correct, Melissa and John? They can't downsize it.
Yes, the code is pretty specific about those requirements for abutting and adjacent.
Yes. And that's why I wanted a specific yes. Does that protect that? And I heard a yes.
All right.
Okay.
Melissa, next slide, please. So we have successfully answered our previous question for Mr. Meyer. We encourage all of our neighbors and public that are involved here to remain engaged. This lists, Mr. Leroy, perhaps you could mute your microphone.
Oh, sorry, I'm sorry. I apologize.
We encourage you to join the email list so you get push notification of our meetings and updates to this information. The website's always available. On the website, there's a self-guided tour that can help you familiarize yourself with our community. And there is a survey that you can complete after related to that self-driving tour that will be reviewed by us here in the future. And as I mentioned earlier, we will be having open houses in the future to give you further opportunity to comment on our area plan as we get there. Okay, Melissa? So our meeting notes from June 10th and June 24th were provided in emails to all the members of the committee. Do any committee members have any inputs on the meeting notes from June 10th and June 24th? Hearing none, I would like to ask for a vote of everyone that approves the meeting minutes as they were provided, or the meeting notes as they were provided from June 10th and 24th. Everyone that in favor, please say aye.
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 Those opposed, please say nay. Hearing none, they are approved as presented. Moving on to the next slide. So we're going to review the draft vision statement for the topics that we're going to be discussing this evening, which is our transportation plan. That's our next step. You'll see some nice new artwork there. So the draft vision for transportation, Melissa, would you like to read that for us?
Sure. I'm going to move my screen there. The transportation system in Doney Park, Timberline, Fernwood integrates and connects multimodal facilities for transit, pedestrian, bicycle, and equestrian users throughout and beyond the planning area. Our future envisions transportation corridors that are safe and accessible for wildlife, motorized, and all non-motorized users. Enhanced opportunities for transit and commuter options are possible at key locations throughout the planning area.
So that's our vision for transportation. And now we're going to get into the goals and policies to achieve that vision.
Oops, sorry, we just wanted to show where we are in our goal and policy review on this slide.
Yep. Here we are.
Here we are. So then I'll need to stop sharing this and go into the document.
And everyone was provided a PDF copy of the document we're reviewing this evening. So we can follow along here on screen or elsewhere.
Okay, I will make it larger.
That would be good.
Tell me when.
Keep going, keep going, keep going, keep going, keep on. A little bit more maybe. All right, how's that work for most folks?
Okay. So, and it's in the track change view is turned off. So this is, track changes are there, but it's the clean view that we're seeing.
To make it simpler to read.
Mm-hmm.
Melissa, I thought that we weren't going to go right into the document. I thought we were going to do a little introduction
thank you,
to the
Liz.
modal maps.
Absolutely, yep, you're right,
Please.
Liz. And
Thank
we
you, Liz.
actually had slides in the PowerPoint to support that.
Yes, thank you.
But Melissa's schedule slide threw us off.
Sorry. There we go.
No.
Oops.
I should have.
We do need to talk about this. Yep.
Yes.
That's. Thank you, Liz.
You're welcome.
Liz, who has worked extremely hard on this section that we're about to jump into.
Can you share the previous?
Did that not
PowerPoint?
share? Okay.
No,
Sorry.
it didn't share. There we go.
Did it turn
All right.
up?
Yep, there it is. Melissa, did you want to cover this one then, please?
I'd be happy to. Thanks. So we did want to bring up and bring back to your attention some of the key resources that went into developing these goals and policies. Transportation is a big topic. There's a lot of technical aspects to it. And so we thought that it might help the committee to think about some of the documents that went into what we'll be looking at tonight. So the 2001 area plan, if you've read the transportation element, it has a lot of information in there. There was actually a separate effort that was conducted prior to the 2001 area plan process starting. And there was a committee of residents that worked for a while specifically on transportation. And what they had put together then was rolled into that plan in 2001. So this is part of our jumping point. Also in 2011, the county had received funding and through ADOT and commissioned a contractor to conduct the multimodal study. And that looked at a number of facilities within the Doney Park, Timberline, Fernwood planning area to include transit. It looked at multimodal trails. It looked at bicycle facilities and went through on a project by project basis. In the end, it listed specific projects that seemed to be feasible at that time and gave it, ranked them in priority order in terms of possibility for funding and also public interest. So that's part of what has gone into this current update. We also, as you know, we had our survey from 2020, and then we've been working to update certain maps that Liz reminded us about. So we've updated the circulation map that is in the 2001 area plan to reflect current conditions. And we'll
But let's add, Melissa, let's add, but it's not finished because there's a lot of labeling needs to do. There's some corrections. So when we look at them.
That's the next map, Liz. So
Okay,
remember,
good.
we've got the two maps. We got the circulation system map, which is pretty much just the streets. And there's a snapshot of that there on the right. And then there's a second map, which is a new map. And that includes multimodal systems, trails, and transit. And that's what Liz was just referring to. And that is sourced from many different agencies. We connected with the Forest Service. We also had existing information within the county. We got layers from the Flagstaff Urban Trail System, from the Flagstaff Trails Initiative, and merged them all into that one map. So we do want to show you that because there is, as Liz was saying, a lot of information. It may not be the easiest map to read. It has robust layers under it all, so it needs to be enhanced. But that's something that we want to bring up to you in a moment. We can jump into also reviewing the survey results from the transportation portion of the survey. Rob, if you want to go over those first, and then we can bring up the maps. Okay.
Yeah, as a result, actually, the local neighborhood watch meeting and a discussion about this particular topic, they wanted to make sure that we were paying attention to the survey results as we go through these individual sections of our area plan, and thought since it's been since November that we really looked at detail in the survey results, we'd quickly go through the ones that relate specifically to transportation before we got into this evening. So I can read these, or we can just kind of look at them. The important things here, and unfortunately, my screen is so small, I'm not really seeing it. Here we go. So what is and is not so important to folks as far as quality of life. And we get a general idea here that transportation scored a 3 on a scale of 1 to 5. So it's a little bit more than average as far as importance go based on that particular question. The next one, please, Melissa. How important do you feel the following issues are to the quality of life? So here we're talking about the need for linkages, something Liz kind of related to or just mentioned there. That scored a 4, so pretty darn important that they want linkages from Doney Park to other types of transportation activities.
Or linkages between, I thought it went linkages between neighborhoods and into Flagstaff.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
So our next one, please. Here, important to non-important public services. And on this one, what was it? So we talked snow removal.
There's road maintenance.
Yeah, road maintenance
services,
and snow removal and those kinds of things. And we can see where they fall as far as importance levels to our survey respondents. And moving on to the next slide. Does the existing roadway system meet your needs? About 75% of the folks seem to feel that it does currently meet their needs, but that leans 25% don't. Then our next slide. Additional pedestrian connections, and Liz, I think you were talking about this. Are rural activity centers and the city of Flagstaff important to you? About 35% said yes, about 65% said no. Next slide. Additional bike, oh, there, okay.
Sorry.
Yeah, additional bicycle connections that link residential areas and neighborhoods. That was important to about 42%, as opposed to 58% not so important. Moving on. Transportation related features and amenities. So pedestrian features, bicycle features, equestrian trails, all scored 3s roughly, and transportation services slightly lower at a 2. Next slide. Is there adequate public access to our Forest Service lands? Over 80% of the folks seem to think there was. Okay, next slide. All right, so that was the all of the different survey questions that had anything to do with transportation. We wanted to make sure we keep that in the forefront of our minds as we move forward through the discussion process here. And then the next slide there, Melissa, goes into.
Sorry.
Nope. LU16. Why are we talking about LU16?
So this was a holdover from the last meeting, and this was something that had been mentioned would be looked at again, and it got out of order, it looks like.
Okay.
Well, then I guess we have to look at it.
Yeah. So this slide could have been placed in a better spot, I guess. Sorry about that, folks. I
my
reviewed
apologies
this
on
with
that.
Melissa earlier, and
So we're going back to land use again, okay? Right? Land use.
yeah. Melissa, can you refresh us on why we decided we need to look at LU16 again?
This was a request. So this is related to commercial development. And this goal says new commercial development should occur on existing commercially zoned land. And I think there was just some questions. I believe, Bernice, I think this was your request to review this again. And I would want to see if you could chime in here and remind us why this was important to revisit.
Okay, I'm looking at it. I thought it was LU2 that I wanted to redo or to look at again, but actually I really want to look at all of it and make sure that we've gone through it and complied with what the survey dictated, and also made it so there couldn't be loopholes.
I think you mentioned LU16 when we were talking.
I thought so too, and I
activity
didn't have a
centers, yeah.
specific reason.
It's about housing on activity centers. That's what I think we had to address.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I think we need to go through it line by line and look at the survey. And I would like to say to people that are on line with us that aren't on the committee, as you access if you can access these documents and you have other language that might you might like better, please let us know.
That's why we encourage public participation in the beginning and end of each session, Bernice.
Right.
Bernice, is there a specific issue here, or you would just like to start over from scratch and do all of LU16 again?
I would like to do all of LU16 again. Oh,
Okay.
I know what it was. Liz, thanks for jogging my memory. It was something about the rural activity centers. When they did the last plan in 2001, there were two rural activity centers. Now there's 7.
No, there were 7 then too, Bernice.
Yes, there were.
In 2001?
Yes.
Yes.
Was the Chevron there?
That's not an activity center.
Yeah, remember I said, Bernice, it's labeled wrong on the map. It's not an activity center. It's proposed activity.
Okay.
That was more residential, and they got that gas station. And I guess because they did a zone change, or but
Okay.
that was an activity.
I would like to limit the development to the existing rural activity centers and not rezone areas to make more commercial development.
Can we just read it
That's
then?
what it says. That's what LU16A says.
Where does
the
it
land is within one of the existing rural activity centers as identified in this plan, and that refers back to LU14, which lists the 7 activity centers, and that hasn't changed in 20 years.
Okay, so where does it say the land? Okay, the land is within one of the existing rural activity centers as identified in this plan. Okay, I see that. That was one thing that was really concerning me.
Well, you know what, would it good to just read the whole thing and refresh everybody's memory about this? Should we just
refresh it? Just everybody chime in if they have something they'd like to change.
So do you want me to read it, Bernice?
Sure.
Rezoning from residential to commercial is strongly discouraged and should be considered only as described in this section. Every effort should be made to utilize existing commercially zoned land prior to requesting a rezoning to commercial. Rezoning may only be considered if there would be an overriding public benefit to residents of the planning area and the zone change meets all the following criteria. And I think that's important. It says public benefit. Okay, well, and let's see what the criteria is. The land is within one of the existing rural activity centers as identified in this plan, LU 14. Adverse impacts on the adjacent neighborhoods are minimalized. The zone change is limited to the land area needed for the plan use. The zone, okay. Rezoning should be limited to 660 feet of frontage on major arterial roads and 330 feet from frontage on a collector roads, which should not exceed 5 acres at each corner of the intersection. New commercial zoning should abut or be adjacent to existing commercially zoned property. Input received from planning area residents support the zone change, including from Planning and Zoning Commission, Board of Supervisor meetings, as well as community and neighborhood meetings where the zone change is a topic of discussion. Compliance with the other commercial goals and policies is demonstrated. The compliance, okay.
So Bernice, specifically, which item here do you have an issue with?
Rezoning may be only considered if there would be an overriding public benefit to residents of the planning area and the zone change meets all of the following. The overriding public benefit for a zone change from residential to commercial would increase density. It would increase traffic. It would increase, you know, to me, the survey that was conducted said, you know, we should go over what the survey said about increasing commercial. Just because there's a public benefit, you can say a public benefit for a lot of different things. And it means something different to everybody. And I just don't want to have a loophole in here where we can start rezoning residential or rezoning anything to make higher density. Could this be multi-unit housing?
Just a minute.
Yeah.
I'd like to add something to that. When you're talking about a public benefit, and this is looking at it from the standpoint of what we do on the P&Z Commission, and then a recommendation to the board. A public benefit. What's a public benefit? Public benefit is we're not going to do something that lowers your property values if at all possible. Are we going to approve something that generates noise, pollution, dust, more traffic? We consider traffic all the time. It is a regular part of it. That's a public benefit. And that's the way we tend to look at it, just to give you a little bit of an overview on public benefits.
So something like an emergency, excuse me, an emergency medical center would be a public benefit if there was something real close by.
And
do you have
you're also going to have to meet performance standards when you do that.
Bernice, do you have a specific suggestion on what you would like to see changed here?
You know, I would really appreciate it if people would contact us through Melissa and give us verbiage that would protect our survey, protect our area. Having an emergency center, I mean, I don't want to debate that. I just feel like we've got enough in town that we can go to. You know, when people live out here, they expect to have to drive a little ways.
But I'm wondering, is there anything specific here that you would like to recommend a change to? You had requested we review this.
Yeah. I thought we wanted to maintain the existing commercial zoning and existing residential. This is, if a developer can think of a public benefit, they could put another gas station or mini mart on the corner. I mean,
No, they could apply to do that. They couldn't automatically do that.
And Bernice, it says the second sentence in the introductory paragraph, every effort should be made to utilize existing commercially zoned land prior to requesting a rezoning.
well, we don't, if somebody wanted to add more commercial property, they could cite that there's a limited commercial property out here because we are a rural area.
Bernice, I would like to tell you that we had a case dealing with exactly that, and it is the property on the northeast corner of Campbell and 89 next to the Chevron station. The decision to recommend against rezoning that, which is AR 2.5 to commercial heavy, was unanimously turned down by the Planning and Zoning Commission. And I think the message was sent very clearly. The individual or the applicant applying for that change did not even go forward to the Board of Supervisors with it. They withdrew the application.
John, did you use number E, or in the old one, was there something new, commercial zoning could not abut or adjacent existing? I mean, but it wouldn't be adjacent because it was next to housing? I don't know, how did it, or you just vote?
That was one of the considerations in the denial of that zoning change or the recommendation for denial.
So,
and the other thing is there are numerous performance standards that have been written into the revised zoning code that deal with exactly that kind of thing. I'll give you for instance, real quick. If you have an RV park, you're going to have to go through a conditional use permit if it abuts residentially zoned property. And in addition to that, there are performance standards that have to be met. And in addition to that, there's also a 50-foot buffer you have to add, which has to be landscaped. So you can see it gets a little difficult to actually make these things go.
So there's lots of discussion, but I need to know whether there is something specific here we would like to change. And if there isn't anything specifically we would like to change, then we need to move on.
I move we move on.
I'll agree with that. Harriet said it all. Let's move on.
I agree.
Okay, I think that's close to a majority of the committee members at least.
Let's move on.
Okay, so let's go ahead and move on to the transportation section there, Melissa. We can go back to our original Word document if we could, please.
Okay, and I was going to just show the maps briefly, if that's okay.
I thought we talked about maps already.
I thought we should display them just briefly. We won't spend a lot of time talking about them. Everybody was emailed this, but this is just to show the updated collector street map.
Okay.
And I just wanted to point out the legend, and I don't know, Liz, if you wanted to chime in here at all, but this does show existing roads. So county maintained roads, and they're color coded by arterial, major collector, and local roads. And then also streets, which are interstate and state highway. So this is an important map to show you the existing roadway system within the planning area.
Is it possible to make it bigger?
Yeah. And so it is just on that note, it's a very large map. So in the PDF, you do have to zoom in to see details. And that's why every street is not labeled. It would just simply be unreadable. Okay, so this is something just to keep in mind. You all have a copy of it. And then there was the second map that we mentioned to display, and that would be the multimodal trails and transit map. Did that one display as well?
Yes.
Okay. And again, just to look at the legend is probably all the detail we wanted to get into with this right now. But this is the one that Liz was describing, does need some annotation and additional labeling and some corrections. But this shows you the robust information that's in it. So it shows existing projects, existing facilities. It shows proposed transit route that comes right out of NAPTA's plan actually from the multimodal plan, and possible transit routes. It shows Flagstaff Trails Initiative identified trails. It shows the Arizona Trail. And then it also shows, and remember, you recall we had a presentation from the Forest Service about the Mount Eldon Dry Lakes project. It shows those proposed trails. That plan is not adopted yet. That's why they're shown as proposed. So without getting into a lot of detail on this, we just wanted to bring it to your attention because this does provide a snapshot of current systems as well as proposed systems that have a good chance of being built. And again, you have to zoom in to see the detail. But Liz, is there anything you wanted to share on this? Because you've looked at this a lot as well.
Right. I love this map, but there's some more work to be done. Like there are activity centers that are mislabeled. And when you go to find some, they're not all accurate. And then a lot of the connections from north to south on Timberline and the connections within Doney Park and Fernwood, their connection roads to these trails that are multimodal, they're not labeled yet. So like, for instance, the Sandy Seep isn't labeled, the Snowflake that we connect right to Futz on the west side of 89, that's not labeled. So it's a lot
Liz,
of information.
Are you saying the streets aren't labeled, right?
The streets, correct.
Yeah, and
the trails
we'll have to be careful about labeling because otherwise we can't label every street on this. As you can see, it would be far too busy.
But when I looked at it as a citizen or someone that I want to have connection, I want to know where to get on that trail. So it's very important for a cyclist or a hiker or an equestrian person to know where you connect to it in your area. And those are not labeled yet, but will be supposedly, and the activity centers will be labeled correctly soon too. So just a lot of work because a lot of agencies put their information in it, but then someone just got to screen it with a fine-tooth comb so people can understand it that want to use this map.
Melissa, this map will not be a part of our area plan. Is that correct?
It could be. I mean, it's a large map, and having it in a document might be very difficult to read. I mean, it would be impossible to read at a document size, but it does, we may be able to use portions of it and enlarge them and use them as inserts, for instance.
And also when we talk about them in the plan sometimes, you can refer back to this because we do refer to some of these trails in the plan. Right, Melissa?
Yeah, and this is this is a pretty interesting snapshot of the systems in your community today. It's just a matter of determining what the best way to display this is on a small scale.
Okay.
All right, so now we can get into the document. Did that come up for you?
Not yet. We're still looking at the map. Still a map.
Okay. Now?
There we go. That's it.
Okay, good. Is it large enough?
I believe so.
Okay. So we'll go right to the first goal.
And Melissa, you're going to read these for us so that folks on the phone can hear. Thank you.
So the first goal is land use and transportation. Land use planning accommodates and promotes an effective circulation system for all modes of travel.
In order to do that, the following policies.
Any comments on the goal? Okay, so the first policy, TC1, reads future land uses should be coordinated with existing and proposed roadways.
I'm not sure I understand exactly what that means.
And there was a comment that that really does repeat the goal.
Yeah, things should be coordinated. Okay. Does anybody else read something into that or see value in that?
So take it out if it's repeating. Yeah, I do.
This is Brian. I think it's repeating the goal
Yep,
also.
I do too.
Yeah, I'll agree with that.
Okay. Should we delete it?
I think we should delete that, yes.
Yes.
Okay, so the track changes are there. They're just hidden.
Okay.
Okay, so the second one, or rather what is now one, the county will use eminent domain as seldom as possible to construct roadway systems.
I guess that's a great idea, but isn't eminent domain always a last resort?
It usually is, and this reiterates that.
I mean, as opposed to as frequently as possible.
No, I think the original, I don't know, Melissa, wasn't the original one, we can go back. Oh, no, it's as seldom as possible. Okay, so we.
So it is an existing policy, slightly reworded, and it just reiterates the idea that eminent domain should not be.
Well, I'm definitely in favor of limited use of eminent domain, so.
I think we keep it in for the reason that it brings up the issue of eminent domain and provides guidance.
Okay. I retract my question.
I agree with Rob. I think we should limit the use of eminent domain wherever possible.
Okay, so old TC2, which is now TC1, stands.
Okay. All right, now the second one, TC2, streets connecting to areas with future development potential should be designed and signed for future continuation and if appropriate, upgraded. So this points to how streets are ultimately designed and signed if there's a potential for future continuation.
Not hearing any objections, we'll move on to TC new three.
New three. Ensure connectivity to existing or planned trails along the roadway system using separated multi-use paths, wide paved shoulders and striping, and other appropriate design options.
So that where it says using separated multi-use paths, I think I understand what they're talking about there, but
that would be the one on Coke Field as a separated multi-use path, for instance.
Separated.
Yes, there's also one alongside of Copeland Lane, or Copeland, but Campbell Lane.
Yeah. Okay.
And it all depends. Sorry, go ahead.
Okay, I'm good with that. And then the wide paved shoulders. So is that above and beyond ADOT or county required road standards?
Well, that is what, for instance, was just
Done in
improved on Towns of Winona.
Yeah.
And that was a county option to widen the shoulders and stripe them for the wider bike lanes. So a lot of it depends on the funding available, the width of the right of way. It really doesn't, it's not an either or. It depends on what's allowed based on the roadway system and what can be permitted to be safe in a safe,
Okay,
in terms of a safe facility.
I'm concerned because I've heard from some folks that, additional paving is not something they want to see. And suggesting or mandating wide paved shoulders.
On existing roads, I think it means to say. I think it means to say wide paved shoulders on existing roads instead of multi-use paths or separated paths. It would be like on 89, supposedly they widened the shoulder as well. They did that a couple years. So maybe we should make it clarified on existing roads.
Well, it also says and other appropriate design options, because then that could take into account where something should not be paved.
Yeah, I think that is reasonable. And one of the things about the paved shoulders or wide shoulders, Public Works has expressed their opinion on that. They like that. rather than a separate paved path, very simply because they have a requirement, they would have a requirement that they plow that other pavement during the winter. It's much easier to deal with the wide shoulders in terms of snow plowing. Went through that at a couple of the neighborhood watch meetings.
So John, if that's the case, then would using separated multi-use paths, are we accepting that those would be unusable during periods of high snowfall?
Well, it all depends on whether they're paved or not. And Public Works, well, you've got one with that is very similar to a paved one alongside of Campbell on the north side of Campbell. But I think Public Works has kind of turned a blind eye to that one. At the neighborhood watch meetings, several times, they expressed the desire to keep it as widened shoulders, very simply because they can deal with that. A dirt path, I don't think there's any requirement, but that didn't get addressed. And you raise a good point with that, Rob.
So if I could just back us up to the intent of this policy is to ensure connectivity to existing or planned trails along the roadway system. And then these are some design options, whether it be a separated multi-use path, a wide paved shoulder with striping, or other appropriate designs.
You're right. The question is connectivity, not what kind of a path it is. At least at this point.
Okay. Anyone have an issue with TC3 as it stands? Let's move on to our roadway system goal, Melissa.
A safe and efficient arterial and collector roadway system facilitates the movement of vehicles and accommodates multimodal travel throughout Doney Park, Timberline, Fernwood, while maintaining the rural character of the area. That's the goal.
Any concerns with the goal as stated? Let's read TC5.
So it would be 4.
Yeah.
The County Public Works Department and Arizona Department of Transportation should consider installing traffic lights on Highway 89 and Burris Lane, parentheses, Rural Activity Center 6, and Copeland Lane, Rural Activity Center 4, to improve unsafe traffic conditions and provide a safe means to cross Highway 89 and connect the west and east neighborhoods. And you'll see on the right, there's a comment. ADOT has looked at that policy, and of course, to install any kind of signal at those intersections would require ADOT approval, and it would need to meet their standards and also meet their warrants in terms of the data. But it's a policy that if it seems to resonate with the community, that that those are points that need some additional consideration for lights, then that can bring attention to the matter. Again, the data has to support it, but that's something to talk about with this update.
And I was informed by one of the committee members at Metropolitan Flagstaff Transportation that if you don't put it in now, it will never be considered. And so as we grow and these activities grow and neighborhoods on both sides try to go back and forth, it is good to have some lights and safe crossing because neighborhoods are getting larger. And just like at Silver Saddle, that 89 traffic light, you see a lot of kids on their bicycles. I've seen horses try across that to go to the forest on the other side and on the east and west, and people just using it because there's a convenience store there and there are big neighborhoods with children. So maybe people go, oh, we don't need it now. There's not too much commercial in that area with Burris and 89, but it's coming. It's coming. So that's why we added it there, just for 2 safe crossings so we can connect the 2 neighborhoods.
Well, this was in the 2001 area plan also, right?
But not Copeland, and Burris was suggested, but it wasn't really considered. It was suggested, and we're saying consider it more.
Okay.
And I see there's a message. There's a message in the chat that perhaps we need to add language that says signal warrant analysis shall be conducted at these intersections. So, and that I think is more specific and more technical language that ADOT
Okay.
would then.
Is that Mr. Wessel's comment? Or?
So, no, that's from actually Julie Lead, and she's with Peak Engineering, who's joined us.
Or the
So
county,
we
Good.
can-
depending on which hat she's wearing that day.
Hmm.
So if we can do some edits right now, if we want.
I'm good making that as detailed as possible to justify getting those lights, because I think anybody that turns left off of Burris Lane on 89,
Right.
taking their lives into their own hands
Yep. Yep. And it's going to get worse.
every single time. I don't envy those folks. So if we could use Julie's language there. And I wonder whether County Public Works Department even belongs in this item, because that's an ADOT controlled road. County Public Works has nothing to do with it, right?
I think there are some policies later that our Public Works Department would address. So that's why it's, oh, I see what you're saying. They
David,
would work with ADOT.
David, did you have a comment on that? Mr. Wessel? Maybe
I'm sorry, I just now got my audio
Yeah.
working. What is the question?
Sorry.
Is there a question?
So our goal says the County Public Works Department and ADOT should consider installing traffic lights at 89 in Burris and 89 and Copeland. Would the County Public Works Department have anything to do with that, or is that strictly ADOT?
That's going to be, this is going to be strictly ADOT. It's going to warrant those.
Okay.
I did see another, I see Julie's chimed in here that the county would probably have to pay for the signal. So we would have to fund this.
Oh, okay, let's leave it as it is.
Wouldn't that be right, Dave? The county would end up having to do the analysis and end up paying for the signal, and really ADOT's involvement is we'll let you do it.
Yeah, I mean, if there's a, if it warrants, you know, it meets the volume requirements or the delay requirements or the safety requirements, you could enter it into their process and see if it moves up in priority. But if you want to accelerate it, yeah, paying for it makes sense.
Okay.
Thanks for letting me interject.
Great, we can leave that in there then. So we're talking about installing traffic lights and specifically at Burris. I wonder whether speed limit changes would be something that would make sense at some of these more dangerous intersections like Burris. And if that would be something we would want to incorporate in here also. Brian, I saw you had your hand up. You still have a comment?
I have a question, if that should read something to the effect of the County Public Works Department and the Board of Supervisors should encourage ADOT to install traffic or to permit traffic lights. Is that something that we should ask the Board of Supervisors to be involved with?
Well, if it's going to require funding, ultimately, I guess they would be anyway, right?
Yes.
If we wanted to expedite it and do it ourselves with ADOT's permission, as opposed to waiting through the process to get a high enough priority in ADOT's queue.
I'm just thinking that, you know, if the Board of Supervisors are encouraged to, or should, however you want to say it, work with ADOT to install traffic lights, it's more likely going to become a higher priority than saying just the County Public Works Department.
Since they're elected officials, right?
Correct.
Anybody, so Brian's recommending that we change County Public Works Department to County Board of Supervisors. Anyone have any objections to that change? Hearing none, we'll ask Melissa to make that.
My recommendation is actually that we add the County Board of Supervisors and maintain the Public Works Department.
Oh.
Or is that redundant?
The Board of Supervisors can direct Public Works to do anything they want, right?
Yes, they can.
So I think if we target the Board of Supervisors, they can then delegate as necessary to make it happen. But we can leave all three in also.
No, I think you're right, Rob. I think it should be,
Put the onus on our elected representatives to get it done.
yes. Because it does need to be done.
Certainly bursts. And I'm going to hate stopping at that stoplight all the time, but for safety reasons, it needs to. Okay.
So you want to take out Public Works Department?
I think that's what we've agreed
Yes.
Okay.
So the County Board of Supervisors should encourage ADOT to consider installing traffic lights.
I'd take out the word consider to install. Encourage ADOT to install.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, any committee members have any more input on TC4?
Are you including putting a traffic light on 89 in Copeland also?
That's included in this statement, yes.
Okay, good.
Can you see it,
Yeah,
Bernice?
that's in there.
Is it visible?
I've
Yeah.
got it.
That's
yeah.
in there.
I just wanted to make sure
Okay.
that we didn't eliminate Copeland.
And
Nope, we didn't.
you know, one question though comes up, is a traffic light all we want, or do we also want a crosswalk?
I think there was a discussion on that before, wasn't there, between Dave W. and Melissa about an island? Didn't I read something like that from some advice that came from either engineering or from Melissa?
I think that that ADOT has certain standards in terms of what kind of island could be on 89. So the
Might have come from ADOT
I
comments.
thought that there was an additional policy down here that
Yeah, we
talked
do talk
about
about it
that.
later, but
Yeah.
the need to
So
be.
this is
able to cross-
specific to a traffic light, and maybe that should stay specific to the signal,
Okay. And then they'll decide what we need for safety.
and then additional crossings.
Yeah.
Yeah, because this goal is about vehicular traffic, not pedestrian.
Right.
So, okay. Moving on to TC5.
Okay, number 5, the county should continue to improve the safety of area residents and ensure the efficient movement of traffic in the Doney Park Timberline Fernwood area by engaging with the community to initiate a study on the operations of the existing and future collector road system, including roads to aid emergency evacuation. The study should determine if projects could be implemented through cost sharing or other funding sources.
Man, that first sentence is sure about.
Yeah, it does seem
Long.
just
But we
rereading
put
it.
this, but we put this in because the last traffic study was, when was that last traffic study and safety done? 90, in the 90s or something, before the first, the other area plan came out. So we just want it updated for safety and emergency evacuation.
So what this could also be is a look at that first map that we showed you, the roadway system in Doney Park, and take a look at potential additional connections needed or evacuation routes. And we do have some suggestions that were put together for us that we can roll out. They're not mapped yet, but we have a list of possible suggestions. And this could be something that to have in an open house where we could put up that map, have the community look at where other potential evacuation routes perhaps would be recommended, and gather more information that way. So, and then there would be opportunities possibly in the future to look at that in even more detail.
Melissa, I'm just going to add information to that. I have been evacuated once with a fire out here, the Schultz fire, Timberline, Fernwood, my little area. Now we have Wapaki, and everyone came out and headed toward Flagstaff, which created a traffic jam. So when we're talking about traffic patterns, we ought to have an emergency decision in advance of some people go south to town, others ought to go north to Cameron, because you end up being trapped in traffic with the fire all around you. I'm just saying, since I've been in it, no one was making really good decisions. And if we made decisions now about in an emergency, the fires are all around us. Some go left, some go right, some go to Cameron, some go into Flagstaff. And that would be an emergency use of all of these patterns. It was chaotic. It was chaotic.
Thanks for that example. That's an important consideration.
And this closer all the time. So yes, thank you.
So
I think that's what this is trying to get to conduct a specific study to look at emergency evacuation routes and also to look at the major collector system, what additional roadways perhaps are needed. We do have some suggestions for that we can show on a map to perhaps improve emergency evacuations. I don't know that it got that detailed, Harriet, for instance, but, you know, in terms of which way people should go depending on where they lived, but that's, you know, we're not going to be able to necessarily create that emergency evacuation plan with this study, although we can make certain suggestions to help that along.
I recommend that we plan it at neighborhood meetings and that we all understand where to go, because in the middle of it, I mean, nobody's thinking at all. I brought a 6-pack of beer and some clean underwear. That's all I took away for 3 days of evacuation. So you're not thinking really well in an emergency.
So back to TC6, I would like to suggest that the county rephrase that mumbling, jumbling first sentence to something to the effect of the county should improve the safety of area residents by conducting a study to get rid of all the stuff in the middle there.
Okay, say that one more time there.
Let me get to your screen here. So I'm looking at the same thing you are. The county should, get rid of continue to.
Yep.
And then get rid of and efficient movement of traffic in Doney Park by engaging community to initiate. And get all the way through to the 2 before initiate.
But Rob, don't you think we have to, are you going to make another sentence, Rob, and add efficient, because that's important too?
Well, that's what this study does. This study engages the citizens to determine efficient, safe movement.
Well, let's see what you say and let's see how it sounds. So I want to make sure efficient movement is.
All right, let me just delete this and you can take a look at it.
Hang on. Well, I was going to say before you delete that, put a period after resident.
Improve the safety of
put a period after residents, ensuring the efficient moving of traffic in the Doney Park, Timberline, Fernwood area by engaging with the community to initiate a study on the operations of existing and future collector road systems, period.
But see, we're getting into all the detail of what the study is.
Mm-hmm.
The study is going to engage with the citizens. We don't have to say that. The study is going to look at the traffic patterns and emergency evacuations. What we're asking for is them to conduct a study. We're not trying to define the study, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just trying to make it as simple and direct as possible. To ensure the safety of the citizens, let's conduct a new survey, a study on safe and efficient transportation, especially relating to emergency evacuations. And how it's funded and all that other stuff, that's beyond the scope of what this document really needs to address, in my opinion.
I think there's 2 points here, Rob.
Okay.
My suggestion would be you could go ahead and delete what is highlighted, but you're correct. It is to initiate a study that A, assesses the operation of existing and future roads, and B, provides for emergency evacuation.
Like that? Yeah, that's good. A good idea. So you can delete what you got there, Melissa. And then say by here, so replace to with by. Oh no, the period was fine.
Okay.
What?
Yep, period. Okay, now by initiating a study.
Sorry.
And then the last sentence can go away also. And then Brian, that covers the two things that you were talking about there, right?
Like that?
Yes. By initiating a study on the operations. I would have said the function, well, operations.
That second sentence is missing something. It's
Yeah,
maybe
it is.
the county should
I
improve
had-
the safety of area residents by initiating a study.
It is not a complete sentence.
And
No.
well,
that's true.
What I was saying.
And we've
was-
got to do,
Hold on a minute. What I was saying is that safety of area residents to initiate a study that A, assesses the operations of the road system, and B, evaluates or plans for emergency evacuation.
oh, I like that. Because it talks about the efficiency of the roads and the safety. Okay, good job, wordsmithing.
Damn it.
So initiate a study that A, parentheses, evaluates the operations or functionality of existing road system.
Yeah.
And B, in parentheses, provides for emergency evacuation.
Okay, I have one wordsmith issue. And that is to initiate should be by initiating.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with Dave on that one.
Okay. I was just trying to get A and B separated.
Okay, I think we now have a much more concise sentence that specifically says what we want. Anybody on the committee see a need to change anything else in TC?
That's good.
I don't know where to add it, but not only do we need a plan, but we need to tell everybody what the plan is.
And communicate it with the residents.
Yeah, and everyone ought to know where they're going in an emergency right now, not in the middle of the emergency.
That would probably almost need to be a new
Yeah, this
policy.
is a road. This is the goal is for the roadway system.
Yep. That facilitates the movement of vehicles and accommodation. So following the sentence or the policy we just updated could be one that addresses Harriet's concern that says the county initiates some type of a system that communicates to the residents what the emergency evacuation routes should be determined from that study.
Thank you. Yes, in advance.
Right.
It didn't help when they came up my driveway and yelled at me.
Melissa, I know you said that, well, that's a different topic, but it is kind of it because we're saying a safe and efficient
Yeah, it belongs
system.
right
So
there.
we got to put it in there. I know you said, well, that's really not addressing the roadway system, but it kind of is because we're calling it safe and efficient. And if we're not telling the residents that what to do, then
Right. I mean, it does cross over and complements the public safety goals. And I know that in those policies, there's a policy that discusses emergency evacuation planning, but it could certainly be cross-referenced here. So what would make sense? Are you thinking of a new policy then?
Yes.
Or,
Yeah.
okay. There we go. There's a number 6.
And that policy should basically say the county should disseminate the results of that study's emergency evacuation plans to all area residents. and especially that lady up on Girls Ranch Road.
Who will be bitching? Who will be bitching the whole way as she's hauled away? Where are my horses? Where are my horses? Yes.
Make sure you have enough beer, Harriet.
I will. And clean underwear. No, you don't make sense when, you know, when the sheriff drives up your driveway and says you're leaving in 10 minutes. You don't really think clearly. So I'm advising let's do better than that.
Okay.
Okay, so that's a new number 6.
So now
We'll
we're back
change
on
all the
track.
numbers.
So yeah, we're good now. Moving on to TC7 then.
So number 7, which was 6, will be the functional classification of roads should be determined based upon established federal standards. That's pretty straightforward and clear.
It's not to me.
So the county uses the federal roadway standards to determine whether a road is considered a arterial or collector, a local road, and it's based on traffic volumes and other measures. The county doesn't make those up. We use federal standards.
If that's the case, why are we having to put that in here?
It's stating the obvious.
Oh my God, if we started doing that, this document would never end.
And, you know, it can in some ways inform developers what standards the county uses for these. So
I'm not seeing much merit in that. If somebody does, I don't hate it.
Yeah, this is Dave. So when you are, you know, if you go back up to TC5 and you're evaluating your collector road system and you decide you need an additional collector roads, or who knows, maybe want to upgrade something to an arterial, having that reference to the federal standards, you know, then you can look at, you know, whether, you know, as you're planning for it, are you going to meet those standards? You know, will it be a collector? Should we build it to a collector? You know, not just classify it, but build it to a county collector standard. And if you're not going to meet those federal expectations, then maybe you build it to a lower standard.
But what about putting a C on TC5? Where evacuation and meets the standards of whatever.
I'm lost on where you're at, Dave.
Okay,
I think he's talking about taking TC7 and make it C under TC5.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah, it needs to be reworded, but.
Well, and then the next question then is the very next policy says the county's collector street standards established by their engineering design construction manual. So which one are we using?
There's a classification process and then an engineering process. The functional classification process has as much to do with funding eligibility as it does with planning. But I would say TC7 is more of a planning tool. TC8 is a design guidance tool.
So is TC8 how the road is built, and TC7 is how the road is, what the demand of the road needs to be, or?
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
Is there help? You know, functional classification is kind of a jargon word. If you put in a parenthetical statement that said, I can't remember if it would be EG or IE, but arterial collector, arterial comma collector, so that people know what functional classification is.
How about functional classification of arterial and collector roads?
Sure.
Can we do that?
So you're put the IE, yeah, there you go.
Don't even have to do IE. There we go. Okay. Everybody good with that?
Actually, should or be and or classification of the arterial and collector roads?
And or, I don't know. whatever, I defer to Dave on that one, the other Dave.
I guess Ann probably works better there, yeah.
And do we want to add the local as well? Do we want to say arterial, collector, and local roads, just capturing everything in the space?
Oh,
I don't think it hurts.
Well,
Thanks, Nick. That was Nick, our assistant county engineer, by the way.
Okay.
he said it, put it in.
That
Yeah,
mystery.
I would go along with that.
Just a suggestion if everyone else is good with it.
That is authority right there.
That's authority.
Okay. Everybody good with TC7?
Good to go.
We like it. Moving on to TC8. Melissa, would you share that one with us?
8, what was 7, what is now 8, the county's collector street standards are established by the Engineering, Design, and Construction Manual, EDCM. Arterial and collector street designs should plan for active transportation systems such as separated pedestrian, bicycle, and equestrian paths. Such trails will follow the design standards and permit requirements of ADOT and other permitting agencies. I would need to make this a bit smaller to get it on one page.
Or you could put a hard return above TC8 and force it to the next.
And let me just add, does anyone add for TC7? Did you notice there's a difference between, we're talking about active transportation, a new term I used, versus multimodal. And that's going to be in our glossary, active transportation. Does anyone know that definition? It's self-powered. So multimodal can could possibly have an engine or, like electric bikes, but this would be active transportation. It's just self-motoring. So there's no motors involved. And that's the big buzzword. So just FYI. I guess no one cares.
I've got to go along with Liz on that one because of the results of a recent incident in our neighborhood with an electric bike that is probably capable of 35 miles an hour.
People really want a distinction now, especially what happened on the Funch Trail, John. You're right. That's why we're making a distinction, and it's in the glossary.
Yeah, that is a really good idea. Relating to what I had to deal with here last weekend.
I don't know that we would have time to hash through it tonight, but the city spent literally years working through the electric bike issue. There's classifications of electric bikes, and some places put limitations on how fast they can go, and enforcement of that is a big question. But if you'd like, I'll work with Melissa and Martin into the city to bring some language forward if you want to talk about the possibility of regulating those.
Okay, I'd have to agree with you on that because based on my experience with a severe problem where a kid almost tried to kill himself, and
that's what
my experience on the Planning and Zoning Commission, boy, you bet.
Well, Liz, I thought if we call active, we've already kind of regulated it. If it's active transportation, it's not an electric bike. So
correct.
Can I ask a question of Dave Wessel? This is Brian Bates. Dave, is this something where you could work with Melissa and perhaps Liz as well, because I know she was engaged with this, to flesh out the verbiage for electric bicycles? Because when does a bicycle become a motorcycle?
Yeah, that's and there are arguments for permitting the lower level, what's called pedal assist, the lower classified electric bikes. There's accessibility issues. I heard a nice story of a family whose the husband and kids were all avid cyclists, and because the mother finally got an e-bike, she could go with them. And so are you going to say, no, I'm sorry, mom, you got to stay at home in that case? So yeah, there's probably some open-mindedness that needs to be applied here, but also, questions about who's going to enforce something like that.
Right.
It's hard enough in the city where you have a good concentration of police officers. It's going to be really tough out in the
Right.
county where the sheriff's office are spread so thin. I'll come up with this. That's a long way of saying I'll come up with some language and see how you guys like it.
Can I go back to the high level here and ask what it is we're trying to accomplish in this conversation? I'm lost.
Well, one thing I think is what do we need to address as far as the future goes? And this is something that is out there that there aren't answers, but it says, look, you got to look at this. You have to consider it as things change.
What are the questions we're being looked at or considering?
So this is Dave. If I could, I think one of the things that you're trying to answer, and it's somewhat semantics and definitions. What do you mean by active transportation? And Liz was right in terms of separating it from the phrase multimodal.
Mm-hmm.
Multimodal in the industry means all modes, motorized, non-motorized, even potentially equestrian. But when you get to active transportation, do you want to be, absolute non-motorized, or do you want to have room in your definition that permits e-bikes of a certain class? And what that does is perhaps inform the type of designs you might employ, as well as, again, enforcement notwithstanding. The city says, e-bikes of certain classes are allowed on paved foot trails, but not allowed on unpaved foot trails. And so
in our area plan though, Dave, we're not saying you can or cannot use a particular kind of bike on a particular kind of trail. That's outside the scope of what our area plan can do.
I think we can suggest things because that's a safety issue, just like suggesting things about density. I think safety is important. And I, who ride my bike all over, I don't want to share it with someone who can go 35 miles an hour on my trail.
So if we could just look at the policy, just to bring us back. So the policy is kind of two parts. It talks about collector street standards. So if there was a new collector street built, for example, so those standards are established by the EDCM. So how that is built is established by the engineering design guidelines and construction manual. We're suggesting then that the arterial and collector street design should also plan for active transportation systems, which we've just discussed, does not have the motor component. It's human powered, such as pedestrian, bicycle, and equestrian paths. So we're saying that collector street should plan for active transportation systems. And then when there is that type of system, the trails or the paths should follow design standards and permit requirements of ADOT and other permitting agencies. So depending on where that street was and who the permitting agency was, that trail would follow their design standards. So it's really addressing, it's kind of a tiered policy, if you would, going from your street to the active transportation system to then how those paths are permitted.
So it's saying if you build a street, you should also plan on building a path, and that path, the way it's defined here, should be for pedestrians, bicycles, and equestrians.
Correct. That's what it's suggesting.
Not electric bikes.
That's what it's suggesting. Yep.
And I'm perfectly comfortable with that just as it's written.
And it could, we could look at the definition of active transportation systems, which we've put in the glossary, and further elaborate there. It might be a place to do that.
The committee, and I also want to bring up to the committee, if you notice, we intermingle, but they're very different. We're trying to come up with a definition between trails and paths. Because for me, trails can have motorized things on it, like the Futz Trail, whereas paths are more indicative, but we're trying to find a definition of not motorized things. It's kind of just like sticking to active transportation systems. So that's another thing, because in here we have trails and paths, and we kind of use them the same, but they're really quite different, but we haven't really gotten there yet. Just to make that to your attention. If you see down there, we have paths and trails, but we're getting there.
Does this need to be two separate policies? Because what I see happening here is that we're trying to deal with motorized or assistant motorized and pedestrian, equestrian, all in one section. So my question is, does this need to be two policies?
Maybe we should. Maybe it should be.
We could,
input?
we could, bring this back, have Dave take a look at it, and we could work with Dave to possibly,
It could,
and have
I
Liz,
think that's a good idea. If Liz and Dave
I do
could come
too.
together on this, and
if you guys are willing.
Yeah.
yeah, if they could, I think that would help, because right now we're not making any progress with this discussion.
Yeah.
Because
Okay.
I think it's because we're trying to mix and match too many different things in one policy.
Good point. Yep.
I'm concerned
Yep.
about the construction of the paths for equestrians. That aren't there county standards for trails that we?
Well, see, that's a good
Not
point.
currently, Bernice.
No,
That's the
we're
thing.
gonna, yeah, we're gonna bring that up later down the thing. We're using Forest Service standards now because we don't have a standard. We have to get a committee to form that. And Melissa was going to do it after this committee went over this to see if we could do a subcommittee to establish that. Yep.
Right.
Well, that would be, yeah, we'll have to do that after this plan is done. So,
Yeah.
Okay, so we're agreeing that TC8 is on hold, and thank Liz and Dave in advance for investing a little time to try to clarify that and maybe break it out into two separate items if necessary, if that makes sense.
Yep, do it that way.
Agree with that?
Agreed.
Okay, and that takes us to 12 minutes till 8, knowing that we have some additional work to do in our scheduling and that kind of stuff in public comments. I'm going to propose this is a good stopping point for this evening, unless anyone objects.
No, I say stop.
Stop.
At least we got to transportation. That's something.
We got partway into transportation. That's
Yes, we did.
plus. All right, excellent work, everyone, for getting us this far tonight. I appreciate all that hard work. We'll ask Melissa to go ahead and shift back to the PowerPoint presentation.
I will. Let me do a quick save here.
Sure.
Hey, with that, you guys need me anymore tonight?
We always need you, Dave.
We
but
always need you,
you're free to
Dave.
go.
Well, permission to be dismissed.
Sure.
Thanks, guys. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Okay, let me go back to the slides.
There it
Okay,
is.
well, I will have to scroll down. Hang on a second, please.
Keep going, keep going,
Mhm,
keep
mhm.
going.
Here we go.
Yep.
Oops.
All right. So did you want to review the schedule, Melissa?
Sure, and we can, as we know, we're right here. We're drafting the vision, goals, and policies, and we had the survey out. We are close to moving to an open house, so I'll just flip to the next slide if that's okay.
Yep, please.
If I can figure out how to do that. There we go. So the next meeting would be scheduled normally, the normal rotation, second Thursday of the month. That would be, make it August 12th. So that's the next regularly scheduled meeting unless you all choose to meet sooner. We did want to let you know that we would like to start to select a date for the open house, and September is a good month. Cromer Elementary has a wide open calendar for September. They are open on the weekdays after 4, and
Weekends
on
after
the
10.
weekends after about 10. So that's something we could possibly work to work on now, and that would then, set a real hard goal for this committee to finish this section. This last section we need to look at, the transportation and circulation system.
Yeah, committee members, I would like to suggest that if we want to conduct an open house in September, waiting for our next meeting until the 12th and hoping that we get through the rest of transportation and have an opportunity to adequately discuss how and what we want to see an open house look like is overly optimistic. So I would like to propose that we do another mini meeting kind of a thing, so that we can make some progress and get through as much of transportation as possible.
Let's do it.
Well,
I'd like to bring up that we still need to discuss the use of the language with the should and shall and must. And I'd like to see the statute that, or, you know, whatever is the rule about using those words in area plans.
yeah, we didn't discuss that, did we? Nuh-uh. We brought it up tonight.
Yeah, we brought it up, but we need
We
to
had
get
it
it
on the agenda somewhere.
so we can talk
Yeah,
about
we did have it on the agenda, yeah.
Interesting.
Mr. Leroy, could you mute your microphone?
Oh,
please?
I'm sorry. I apologize. God, I'm so sorry. I apologize.
Can our county attorney help with that? Isn't he the person who would know what the language of various things are? Couldn't we?
And the law of it, and the law in the state, is it a statute that we can't use that? Is there a, yeah, no.
No,
It's not, it hasn't been a state.
Call the county attorney. We don't know. So we just call the county attorney, ask him to research it and give us a reading. That would be the simplest possible thing. He's the expert.
So it hasn't been a state statute, Liz, and it has been what the county attorney's office has directed us to do when we write these kinds of area plans. And I will contact their office and find out what kind of assistance they might be able to give us.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I think what we need to do is formally request at our next meeting
That he
that
come.
a representative from the county attorney's office
Yeah.
be present
Yeah.
to help us as committee members understand the rules and regulations regarding language in an area plan as we're drafting it.
Yes.
And I will, you know, just again reiterate what we've been advised is, and again, we know this is because it's
we all know what
policy.
we've been advised. We're formally requesting the county attorney to do that.
Okay, and can we put it on the agenda for the next meeting, or?
Yes, yes, that I am formally requesting that be an agenda item for the next meeting.
And I would like to offer a suggestion to everyone here that may help them when we get there. That if you very simply read the Arizona Revised Statutes 11-804, it is referred to in the zoning code. Just read that before you come to the next meeting. It is easily found on the legislature's website.
Or could you put that in the chat for us so everybody has that specific RERS for us?
You bet. I will do that.
Thank you, John.
Would it be possible to send the link to that out to the committee members?
Bernice, if you Google the ARS, it's going to pop up immediately. It's.
But I won't know if it's the most current.
Yeah, it is the most current. What is on the legislature's website with regard to that section in Title 11 is the most current. I have read it about a zillion times recently and over the years. So I have to know this for the Planning and Zoning Commission. But ARS 11-804, I'm going to put that in the chat box for you. It will get you right there.
Thank you.
And that's all we have to do. We just have to Google ARS 11-804.
That is all you need to do.
Okay.
It is written in plain English on top of it.
Thank you.
So going back to my suggestion that we have a mini meeting to make sure that we're going to be adequately prepared for an open house. Any committee members' comments or thoughts on that?
I'd like to do that
We
because
should do it.
August 12th, I'll be in the canyon, so I can't attend that one. So I don't care if I'm not in on the planning for the open house, but I'd like to be through the discussions of the document.
So what about 2 weeks from today, the 29th of July?
12th meeting?
Pardon me?
Okay.
What Bernice, we didn't hear you.
I was going to say, can we change the meeting so Evelyn can attend?
Well, in 2 weeks
Can
from
we
today is the
change the
22nd.
meeting
That's
date for
Monica.
August 12th so that
Bernice, that's
No,
Monica.
don't worry about the 12th. Thanks, Bernice. But the 2 weeks from now, Rob, is the 22nd.
Oh, okay. 14 and 8. Yes.
I can do that one.
So if that would work for everybody.
Yes.
is that where we'll discuss the language?
Yes, that will be our next meeting, and that's
I'm
something
sorry, I did not hear that date. What is the date?
that the 22nd, I believe.
July 22nd.
Oh, man, I'm not gonna, okay.
So Melissa and Rob,
Mhm.
I will be out of town and not able to attend at all because I'll be in Canyonlands. So that would roll the chair back to you, Rob.
I'm in favor of doing whatever's necessary to get us done in a timely manner, so I'm happy to.
What about next week? I hate to make it so soon, but what about the 15th?
Works for me.
Works for me.
A week
Well,
from
doesn't it
tonight.
depend? Well, Melissa, let's see when Dave and I can do that meeting. I don't know when he's going to be available. I'm not available the 22nd. I'm out of town too. Next week would work, but don't we want to have that meeting with Dave before?
We wouldn't have to have that, Liz, because we're going to have the.
There's a lot more to look
scheduled
through.
August meeting anyway, yeah.
Oh, okay, okay, okay.
Can we get the county attorney's office there on?
I don't know, Bernice, I'll have to contact them, but for the committee still has a lot of work to do on this one section.
On which one section? Transportation?
On
or
transportation.
Oh, okay, yeah, we've got a lot in transportation that's going to add.
Okay, so it sounds like the 15th is going to work best for everyone to have a mini meeting and to continue making progress, picking up where we left off. If Liz and Dave have had some success with policy 8, and if not, we'll start with policy 9.
Yeah, we can just skip it and go back to it. Okay.
So that's a week from tonight.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think it's really important for us to get the language before we do a lot more work on this, because it might have, it might possibly be able to be changed.
Bernice, I think that if we find out that a word other than should needs to be used, replace is a pretty easy function to use in Word, and we can probably do that quite easily.
Okay.
Yeah, and I wouldn't be too concerned about it, very simply because I do not believe it will change.
Okay, so we've decided on the next meeting.
July 15th.
Yes.
Can I
5 p.m.
just,
like we.
At 5 or 6, at 5 or 6.
I'd say 5, but.
Okay.
I think we should do it at 6 because a lot of people would like to be on that work.
Right. And they get out right at 5. And it's a mini meeting, so that means mini meeting means like 2 hours instead of 3.
Let's do it at 6 to 8 p.m.
Okay.
July 15th.
Great. Thank you.
Does that work for you, Melissa?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
This is Evelyn. I'm just wanting to make sure that to have a quorum, that any of the members that are here now do plan to make that meeting so that we can have a quorum.
Yeah, that's certainly important. We don't want to call a meeting and then not have that quorum. So if anybody can't make it now, it's important you share that.
Let us know.
Okay. As Melissa mentioned, we have opportunities for open houses in September. Keep in the back of your mind what you want an open house to look like, what kind of information we need to be able to share. How it's been done in the past is, I think, big poster board kinds of things and big rooms, and individuals or groups of people walk around and share thoughts. That's an option, but I think we can do pretty much whatever we would like, providing it doesn't cost a lot of money, right, Melissa? And so keep that in mind.
We have printer paper and ink.
Okay.
But I think also importantly to consider a date.
I think the end of September would be better.
I have a suggestion that we keep it on a Thursday because that's been our standard date to meet. And we're more likely to have folks attend, particularly those community members that have been in these meetings.
Well, I think we're going to have more than one, and I think one should probably be a weeknight and one should be a weekend.
Well, Rob, if I could also suggest that we'll have an in-person meeting and then we will make a virtual platform that's pretty much identical to the in-person meeting available for people that can't attend the open house on that specific time. So we have a forum that we can use and people will be able to go and post their comments much the same way that they will be able to do in an open house. So we'll make that available as well.
Okay.
September, the second Thursday in September is September 9th. And I heard somebody say maybe more toward the end.
Could we make
At least middle.
the date for the first meeting, next meeting's topic? So that we'll have a chance to look at our schedules and calendars and see what's going to work best.
Yep.
Okay, so I would ask all the committee members to please be prepared at the next meeting to pick the dates. Ideally, we would like as many of us in person at the event as possible.
Exactly. And then what we have done in the past, not that we have to do it again, but it seemed to work well, is for the committee's members that were specific to a chapter or an element, then they would basically host that board, for instance.
We're getting deeper
I'm getting
into.
too deep. Sorry. Yep.
Yeah.
Sorry.
All right.
This is Evelyn. I have one more question. We talked about meeting in person for the next meeting. Would that be the 15th of July?
No, that'll be a Zoom meeting again.
Okay.
Okay, what's our next slide, Melissa? Excellent.
And Rob, just so you know, apparently my computer will be restarting in about 15 minutes, so we'll need to hurry on.
We have time for just a few comments. All right, we're here to public comment. All of those of you that lasted through all of this, I admire your steadfastness. I'm impressed and I appreciate very much the fact that you're still here. Anyone from the general public that has a comment they would like to share, if you could unmute, and Mr. Leroy is waving once again.
Sorry. So how much time do I have?
3 minutes.
Okay. So number one, when the committee was formed a couple of years back, did the Coconino County, these are just questions I would like to be asked on the record, did Coconino County advise all of you how they're going to personally indemnify you against lawsuits?
Mr.
So in other words,
if you have specific legal questions, I think a better way to indicate those would be to email those to Ms. Shaw so that there's no.
I'll do that. It's okay. It's on the record. I'm just trying to get on the record. I wondered if the committee was advised if you all were protected or indemnified by the county against personal lawsuits. Yes or no? That's the question. Next question. Taking notes about the 4 committee members who have stood up against the usage of the words must and shall, based on formal legal opinion. I appreciate the fact that y'all are going to go to Coconino County to get a redone. Would you be willing to get a second opinion from any other lawyer in the state other than the one representing Coconino County who's going to cover their butt trying to tell you what they're doing? Because I know for a fact, John, that the word must can be used and it's being used all over the state and other plans. So, brother, God bless you. We're Vietnam brothers. I get that point, but I'm against you on this particular issue. So I want to put everybody on record that until all of the committee members have done their personal research to disprove that the word must can be used, y'all are violating your fiduciary duty, and you might want to Google breach of fiduciary duty damages. Just Google it, because you're making yourself liable personally unless Coconino County is going to indemnify
Thank you, Mr. Leroy. We appreciate your comments.
Yeah, courts cut me off.
No. You issued 2 questions, I believe. Do you have any other points?
I do. I just want all the committee members to recognize that all your personal assets are
We are at 3 minutes. I'm sorry.
Yeah, okay, Melissa, of course.
Thank you.
Hi, this is Sheila Walsh. Can I make a comment?
Please do, Ms. Walsh.
Thank you. Thanks for the meeting. I'm sorry that Mr. Wessel wasn't left because I'm looking at the final report, Doney Park Multimodal Transportation Study. And on page 20, with respect to those electric bikes, this is the perfect sentence on page 20. The guide concludes that shared use paths should not be considered a substitute for street improvements such as bike lanes, paved shoulders, even when a path is located adjacent to a highway. So of the 5 options for making multimodal transportation from our neighborhoods into town, which I am in support of it, I'm just very particular about safety and I don't like pavement. Actually restriping our roads slows down traffic to maybe the speed limit and makes room for bicycles to ride on the roads, which is where I think electric bikes belong. Again, I'm going to reiterate that of the all paths that are made by this multimodal plan, I am going to campaign for it to be the same grade and material used by the Forest Service for their trail from Timberline into town, because I know the forest won't pave in the forest. Also, I'm really interested how this TC1 minimizing eminent domain is going to work with this multimodal transportation plan in the future, because 29 miles of roads are going to require a minimum of 30 to 40 feet of people's frontage to their homes. That's all I had to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Walsh. I appreciate that. Other members of the public that would like to share this evening? Okay.
Yes. Yeah, I'm part.
Go ahead.
I just like to say, Bernice, thank you for staying on task with the high-density homes. You're really pushing forward to that. I know I appreciate you. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Jacks.
Thank you.
Mr. Weedman, did you have something?
Yes. I also wanted to thank Bernice for standing up for the community and bringing up the results of the survey all the time. It's something that shouldn't be forgot at all. And another thing, earlier tonight, or not that earlier, but you were talking about having traffic lights put on 89 at Burris Lane and other lanes. You know, somehow all those traffic lights on 89 doesn't seem like very rural to me. But someone had mentioned that the Board of Supervisors should encourage ADOT to do a study about that. And I think I know the outcome of what will happen down the road a ways. And I think the Board of Supervisors should actually be encouraging ADOT to do an 89 bypass. And 89 should probably come off of the interstate north of the Doney Park, Timberline, Fernwood area, and then move north and connect somewhere out in there. And I know firsthand that ADOT has already been talking about this. And just a little history, going back a little over 30 years ago, ADOT had a meeting out here on, I'm not sure exactly where it was, I forget now, maybe the fire station had just gone in out there, but they were talking about taking 89 and bringing it up through the off-road vehicle area and going that way and kind of bypassing the pass and then connecting with 89 farther north. And that was before they widened 89. So, I mean, they look at these things way ahead. They were talking about that. And instead of having traffic lights all on 89 going north or south from town, I think the Board of Supervisors needs to encourage ADOT to start considering a bypass. Maybe this would be 89 and 89 would actually bypass the Doney Park Timberline Fernwood area. It's eventually that will happen. It's happened in every community I've ever lived in. You know, as the population grows and more traffic. So that I think that would be a really good way to go. And then you would kind of eliminate the need for a lot of those traffic lights, safety on the road. It would be much safer. The whole thing, I think, would be really great for the community, and the Board of Supervisors, in my opinion, should be encouraging ADOT to
Mr.
do
Weedman,
something.
I think you've reached your 3 minutes there. I very much appreciate your thoughts.
All right, well, thank you.
Thank you, Russell.
Thank you. Any other members of the public that would like to share thoughts this evening? You could unmute and introduce yourself. If not, committee members, any final thoughts before we move on?
Yeah, I've got one. I've got to say that it is unfortunate that William Leroy isn't with us right now. I'd be more than happy to sit down over a cup of coffee and discuss his comments. I have also researched other counties' area plans. Not all of them have area plans. They just rely on their general plan, and that the use of the affirmative must, I couldn't find it anywhere. Same thing with shall. It is not there. And in one, right in the first summary paragraph, and I believe it's Apache County, says that this is not a regulatory document. So that's pretty affirmative right there. So
Okay.
I think this is the reading we're going to get from the county attorney's office, and I'd be happy to be corrected on that.
Thank you, John. Other committee members, thoughts to share before we wrap up?
Yeah, for September. Our regular meeting is the 9th. That could be a meeting that we finalize everything, get it ready for the open house, and do the open house on the 23rd, which is 2 weeks later.
And
It's just something to think about.
that's kind of the direction I was looking, Jim, and why I wanted to get this mini meeting in here to enable
Yeah.
us.
Yeah, it just gives everybody something to think about.
Excellent. Thank you, Jim.
Yep.
Any other thoughts? Hearing none, I'm going to call this meeting to a close. Thank all of you for your participation this evening, and look forward to seeing you 1 week from today at 6 p.m. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Have a good night.
Thank you.